As soon as it's like, hey, we're gonna announce it this day, and that day would come like, yeah, we're gonna delay another 3 months. So.
Do you know Kevin?
Hey there. Hi.
Hi.
Kevin Clinton.
I'm not sure his last name, but he works on it too. Yeah, Clinton.
Yep. I know Kevin well.
Yeah. So my daughter babysits
Okay.
his daughter. And they were a neighbor, and then they bought a house sort of in the other part of town.
Yeah. So did you live over off Yarrow?
Yeah, I think I literally live right up the street from you.
Yeah, I was gonna say you probably think you do
live
because I'm on West Yarrow and he was over on what Snapdragon or
yeah.
Link or one of those.
Yeah, we're at Snapdragon.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think I saw you. I figured out it was your place because I think one time when we came to one of the previous meetings, like I was
We were
behind
following
you.
each other the whole way.
Yeah, and then I saw that you just like, did you guys just get a new deck or something about?
No, that's the neighbor next to us.
Oh, that's the neighbor next to you.
Yes,
that
that's a
did the
rental
deck.
property, so the
Okay.
owners put a new deck in, but I noticed today that there's a big sign on the door from the town of Superior.
What's up,
A
Ron?
big stop notice.
They probably didn't get the permitting.
Kinda have to do that.
Especially when when your backyard is open space.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
gonna hide it from anybody that you're
These
doing this.
architect guys, don't you see them? They walk around. I mean, they walk around, they look at all the houses, they'll write you a little note. if
These
you're-
guys get after it. You're putting it that people on the architect.
Hell yeah, I'm calling them out.
I don't
We almost had an arm wrestle to get my green
Well, no,
house.
but that's different though, because the town notice is the permit's different than the.
It's a town, it wasn't a HOA, it was a town.
I don't remember looking at a deck approval for Yarrow.
Because you didn't.
Because you did it.
For an HOA.
I'm sure that's what I was telling you, that's why they have, part of it is why they have the notice from the town saying, hey, where's your building permit?
Well, yeah, but I'm saying those are two different things.
I know, but if they didn't do the building permit, they probably didn't do
The
the
town
HOA.
is probably actually less likely to catch it than the HOA. Because the town doesn't really have anyone driving around, whereas the HOA does.
Right.
So
Although they have a big dumpster out, like, you know.
Hey, Chris.
Well, they also
And
got,
they're
they also,
about
so what's
60
funny is
yards
that is,
closer.
my other neighbor, because they had that in front of his house, they got the notice from the town saying, hey, you get to move your trailer, it's like, it's not mine, they just parked it in front of my house.
I get it.
That's not too much.
Yeah, it's,
Are you excited for Sunday? Are you
they're all
ready?
mine.
Yeah.
I'm
I'm
sure.
trying not to
Are you
think
barely
about it.
holding on?
I'm not trying not to think about it.
Do you have tickets? Are you?
I've seen it. Yes.
Nice. That's awesome.
Well, I haven't looked to see what the tickets are selling for in my section. Because if they're
So far.
selling for like $600 a piece, I might have to go. Okay, bye-bye, I'm not going.
Why not order a couple pizzas and?
You know, even pay for my season tickets for next year, I could.
That's not a bad deal.
Yeah, those things are premium. People will
Well,
definitely.
last time the tickets in I was in the very cheapest section, and the tickets in my section were selling for like $5.95. Now I'm in the second cheapest section, so they might be selling for even more, but I haven't bought, so.
I had an offer this morning, 2 tickets for $400 a piece, first row like 40 or 30 or something like that.
For your
In the lowest bowl, no, no.
In the lowest bowl,
I had an
$400
opportunity to buy some.
Why
for
did you
400
buy
a piece.
them? In the lowest bowl for $400, that's
Yeah, it's like in
ridiculous.
like row 30 or something.
That's.
Just like a
you
friend of
should've done
mine,
that.
I'm like,
Dude, you should call them, I'd have bought them.
And sold your other one.
And sold my other ones. Yeah, for those 30, holy crap, yeah, cause I'm row
Moved down from
15 in nosebleeds.
Right.
It was less of a.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
I just,
I'm excited. Till I look and see how much the tickets are really selling for. I haven't even looked to see what I paid for mine, I just said,
See George on
"Here's
the
your
walk.
card,
I thought
I'm
I
done."
thought I saw him. No, I didn't hear anything from Lindsay.
She's not coming.
Lindsay's not gonna, okay.
Yeah, sorry I'm late.
Oh, that's right.
Board meeting.
I was told before.
Oh, yeah, you were even
I was
later.
later.
For a minute for
Right.
George. I saw George in the building.
He is, he's
Yeah, I
in
saw-
Martin.
What's that? Oh,
He's in
he's
Martin's office.
Alright.
I'll just
Well,
get going.
Yeah, let's get started. Alright, so, call to order this meeting of PROSTAC, January 20, 2016. All in attendance except Lindsay Boyle, who is excused. We're gonna kind of leapfrog the agenda real quick. So on the update items, we have the El Dorado School Park. I don't know how many of you are familiar with what happened at the board meeting last Monday, but there was a group of residents from Torrey's Peak and Opal bordering the park who showed up to comment about their dislike of the location and noise they think will be generated by the basketball court. And so the board closed public comment and started discussing, and they kind of gave direction to staff to make the basketball court now optional in the design. Of course, the contract was already out for bid. Patrick can update us on that in a minute. But we're gonna, I don't think we want to open this up for a lot of discussion, but since Jim Payne is here, he was, chair and member of PROSTAC during the very beginning of El Dorado parcel, kind of, 2011, I think, went as far as back as, and then 2013, where a lot of the activity happened. So he was just going to make a public comment on some of his background with the park design, and then we can discuss it briefly before jumping into the regular agenda items. So we'll open up for public comment. We also have another member of the public here, so you're welcome to speak if you want as well.
I'm talking about me.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I was invited. Are you Patrick?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm Noelle Rooney, and I've emailed Patrick several times. So he told me I should probably show up because I'm very interested in parks and recreation in the area, and I live a block from El Dorado. My public comment would be, I think that's pretty ridiculous to say basketball courts are going to be that noisy in that area, but I don't know, maybe they know something I don't.
Yeah, so I mean, we can all kind of, if we want to, speak a little bit to that specific point, but I think the bigger thing that we should address, we'll let Jim speak, but the bigger thing we want to address is the fact that we went through an extensive public process on this park. I mean, some of you weren't here, but some of you were for the last couple of years. And I mean, this basketball court has been in the design since the beginning. It's always been that, in the top 10 priorities that we need on our annual list that we need for the town is additional basketball courts. So the fact that it's getting removed potentially after all the work we've done and without any, comment from the public on the other side of the spectrum, this, because they only heard from a handful of people who said they don't want the basketball court. They didn't hear from the other, 1,250 homes south of Colton that might have a say in the other direction. So I think that, the point we might want to make to the board at the next meeting, and I'm happy to speak on our behalf, is that, we stand behind the process we went through to get to the design that we have. So, Jim.
Thank you, Peter. Good evening. So I'm Jim Payne. I served and chaired this committee for about 7 years, beginning in 2007, and was involved throughout this whole process. And I'm not here really to. Well, let me start by saying I back up to a park area, community park. I'm very sensitive to what goes in there, and the distances and the noise, and what kinds of things go where. So I have some basic sympathy with neighbors around the park who expressed concern. So I'm not really here to advocate against them or for them, but I just wanted to give you some of the history for those who weren't here, and maybe as a reminder for those who were. So on the subject of distances, and I've spent a lot of time studying this over the years, and I have a general rule of thumb that I think holds up pretty well, and I've researched it in different parts of the town in different circumstances, and including the dog park and many others. And I sort of divide amenities into low impact, which would be like a trail, high impact, which would be dog park or a multi-purpose field, anything that has where impact is measured by volume of activity, noise, vehicle and pedestrian traffic, resident and participant interaction, what's it causing in terms of interaction with residents nearby. So low impact, high impact would be a multi-purpose field or dog park. And then basketball court to me, and this is debatable, someone could debate it, but falls into a medium impact level. And I would point out that right behind me, a little further from me than it is from the complainants in this case, but actually closer to the closest house is the basketball court on Indiana and Colton. And to be fair, most of the people who live there now, that basketball court or its predecessor inline skate rink was there when they bought their homes. But that's about 110 feet from the basketball post to the fence. And in that particular case, they have a bigger backyard, so it's maybe 175 feet from the closest basketball post to the back of the house. But, and in the case of the houses on Opal, and there's really one house that, in my mind, really is the only one that has a legitimate question here, but their house they have virtually no backyard. Their house is right up against the fence. But you're not talking about significantly different distances. So that just gives you some perspective on the distance. And when the two presentations ago in the board meeting, when that volleyball court had worked its way in right up against the fence, there was no question that that was too close in my mind. I would have joined the neighbors in that area and say, hey, this is just too close. But the basketball court is a reasonable distance. It was there in that position, if not a little. There, is that it there?
I've got the previous two iterations too.
Oh, this is the current one.
This is current.
Can you put up the final, the one that you submitted, the final from the process?
So this is original phase, phase 3 from the first process.
So you can see the basketball court was in fact, in some ways, even closer to more houses because it was along Torrey's Peak there, as well as in proximity to Opal. Now, many of the people, some of the people I know who are raising this issue now participated in this process. This was the final output of that process, and it was applauded, and everybody was just gaga over it. So don't let anyone say there was no process in this. There was more process on this than almost anything we've done. We had multiple meetings, community meetings, postcards mailed to everyone in town and for nearby neighbors, an extensive canvassing door to door. We had, realtor boxes with flyers and around the school and around that whole area. So this was a very extensive outreach program. A lot of people participated. And so that brings me to the other point, which is that the major, and many of you were there, the major sort of area of debate between the residents that participated was between those who wanted lots of amenities. They just said, oh yeah, we want courts, we want lots of things, and those who wanted to keep it more passive. Well, it ended up being relatively moderate on amenities. then when the board got involved and we looked at dollars and phases and everything else, what we're looking at now really just is bare bones as far as amenities are concerned. But for the board to allow someone, and they have the right to state their opinion, but for the board to entertain one faction coming back at this point, and who wanted it more passive and wanted it more open space than an amenity-rich park, to come back by themselves and argue their position and have that reconsidered. I don't know why you'd ever do a process like this again. I mean, you might as well just not do it. Because we balanced those concerns. We built consensus. We had everybody on the same page enthusiastically. So it's not fair for one part of the equation, one group to come back who wanted more of a passive approach in the park and then upset the whole apple cart after all of this work was done, all of this consensus was built, and PROSTAC, working in that public process, had very, I think, carefully and appropriately balanced those 2 points of view. So, so anyway, if you agree with me, and I would say the basketball court behind Clayton Circle, I've never heard complaints that the people on Clayton Circle use it extensively. I don't hear it. I've got numerous basketball hoops on my street in the front that are approximately as close as this would be. I don't hear that. Maybe in a summer night in the evening, if someone's out there late, you might hear something in the distance if your windows are open. But that's why I consider this a moderate impact amenity. And if it's a moderate impact amenity, ideally, it would be great to have 150 to 200 feet instead of 125 or whatever this ends up being. Maybe it can be moved and rearranged to be moved out a little bit, but I don't think it's going to make a big difference. The issue now should be, is there adequate screening and an adequate buffer and trees and all those sorts of things between the houses and the amenities? That's where the focus should be. But I have to tell you, to reopen this now without, and if you're going to reopen it, then you've got to go back and let all the people speak who are disappointed that we didn't have more amenities in there. And if we're not going to do that, to let one side come back and upset this at this point is a dangerous precedent, and it just would have wasted years and tens of thousands of dollars that went into all of this process, consultants and everything else. So I just wanted to leave you with those thoughts.
So,
Patrick, can you put up the
Very good ones, too.
new
Thank you.
design?
This one?
No, the current one, the
Current
one that
one?
went out for bid. So, I mean, this is, you can see what the phase 3 was, everything that was in it. This is what we're getting today, if you include the basketball court. And, you know, I would just echo what Jim said about how, you know, we had a very amenity-rich design that got, for various reasons, budget constraints, board direction, further public input, got stripped down from, you know, probably about a dozen active amenities to 3. The net climber, the sand volleyball court, and the basketball court. If you now take the basketball court out, not only do we have almost nowhere else in town to put a basketball court at this point. I mean, maybe you can get one in the parcel 3 of the town center. But you strip this park of only one of only 3 remaining active amenities. So you remove a lot of the teen element. I mean, that was kind of what the basketball court, I mean, the basketball court obviously serves pretty much all ages, but it was the one amenity that was really kind of geared towards teens. And again, you basically remove the public process out of everything we did. So that's, you know, that's what I would like to remind the board on Monday night before really reconsider, they're saying that the basketball court's now optional, reconsider the optionality of it. And, that's a word. And, you know, keep it in the design. If you really are considering taking it out of the design and then open it back up, like Jim said, for all the public to comment, because you really can't remove, everything that was done to date just based on a couple people. But, I mean, any thoughts?
I have two questions. So Jim, one of the questions I wrote down was noise complaints. And Jim, you said you're not aware of many, but do noise complaints make it to you if an amenity is highly disruptive in the community? Do you guys hear about it?
Yeah, we hear about it, you know.
And has that been the case there at all?
No, not at, I haven't, in my 5 years here, received a complaint about basketball. Every now and then I'll get something about just it being noisy at Community Park too early in the morning, but I haven't heard anything about basketball.
And then I missed a couple of our last meetings at the end of 2015. Did anybody come to PROSTAC and address this?
No.
No.
So then another question, just really quick, I don't wanna point this out. If Lloyd was not part of that comment, I'm curious if he was.
No. He's
Okay.
actually moving, he's selling his house.
Okay.
Thank you. The basketball court?
My point was just that he was
actually wanted parking there, so.
he was a PROSTAC
Right.
member, so I would
Yeah.
have said that he knew the process, but that's
No,
not appropriate.
he hasn't shown up for a while, and he is actually moving.
Okay.
But, I mean, so you know, the one resident that kind of led this charge, she had went to Jeff Isaacson, who, those of you remember, was a member of PROSTAC for a while, until like about the middle of last year. And Jeff came to me, and, this was maybe about a month ago. And some of the things she was saying were just ridiculous. I mean, like saying this park was gonna harm property values, all kinds of stuff. She kind of whittled it down to focusing on the basketball court when she finally went to the public comment at the board meeting last Monday. And that's primarily what the couple other residents that made public comment focused on. I mean, some of them also started harping on the parking loop and some other things that were, you know, again, heavily discussed between PROSTAC and the public meetings and the board. So really, nothing was said by those residents that hadn't already been addressed by the public process.
So may I ask when they said it was optional, what is that supposed to mean?
That's what I want to know, yeah.
So
What is the
you
board,
got,
what is the
what's it
intention of the
mean?
board when they say optional?
What was optional?
What's it
basketball.
mean if it's optional? So I mean, they just don't put it in, what else goes in there?
Well, I mean, optional to me is, you know, it could or couldn't, so they're not, it's not
Based
committal.
on what though? What makes the decision?
Yeah.
well, the board would make the decision at this point.
Yeah, well, there was a point in time when were we considering having those two spots prepared to put something there, but maybe leave them open for when the time came to put it in, then we were gonna put something there.
No.
Well, for the phases,
That was-
yeah.
that was when we
Well, that was when we were
So
phasing,
the-
but this was the final plan.
Right, I understand that. So, no, I agree with Jim and Peter 100%, that this process happened, and there was a lot of input that started, how long ago was it when we walked the neighborhood there? Probably like
3 years ago.
4 years. At
3 or
least
4 years
at
ago.
least that, yeah. I am sympathetic to those residents that are concerned. They don't know for sure if it's gonna be noisy, but if someone's playing basketball there, it's gonna be during the day. It's not gonna be at night. It's not gonna be at 6 in the morning. So I think there's gonna be just as much chance for noise from kids running in the park and screaming and having a good time, probably more so than hearing a basketball hitting the deck. There's a neighbor in my neighborhood that plays basketball sometimes at 10 o'clock at night in his backyard. But he's right next door, and I hear it. So I am sympathetic to that. But, I don't know, I would ask the PROSTAC to see, is there an opportunity to take that to court, and can you move it over to the other side of that trail?
Well,
And would that solve the problem?
the real question is, can you swap the basketball and volleyball? That's gonna give you that much more distance, and the volleyball isn't making much sound on the sand.
One of the trustees, one of the other trustees, Sandy Pennington, asked me about that. And the problem is that basketball court, if it's switched with the volleyball court, then becomes closer to all of those houses on Torrey. And they were specific. Right now, there's really only you're gonna have those houses on
But
West.
what about just
But you could
to the
move that
right,
trail.
just to the right of the trail?
Right,
Just to
or,
the right
or
of the
just
trail.
move the trail, but, and
So further
Patrick's
out
not
into the
saying
green,
anything,
so
but
you're gonna wipe out
Well,
the green space?
it's not quite that simple.
Well, where you swap the neck.
My question is how's the field, a field fit in that green space? Like if you had a soccer field or.
It's not
like-
for, that's.
I know, but I see that it'll be used for those types of
For
things.
U12,
where kids will
U10
just go out
soccer,
there
it'll
and
happen all the
practice
time.
and-
As
At
long
one
as it's not
point,
too
you
much
had an
See,
overlay, right, for what size
You could
field
take
that
out
grass
that-
area was?
Yeah,
Just for a
I don't
minute,
have it with
you
me.
could take out the trail that cuts through, or you could move the trail over and slide the, move the basketball court over 10, 20, 50, 30, 40 feet. And what I'm saying is, if there is a noise issue, it's gonna be it's probably not gonna make a big difference unless you really get it out of there. And you do better to focus on the buffering and the screening of the noise through
And
landscaping.
Isn't it also
through-
in the contours that it's
Mhm.
downhill
It downs,
and, I mean,
yes.
they're sitting up on
Those
top and there's
opal
some-
houses sit significantly above,
Right.
probably like 20
'Cause that's
feet or
wide.
something
It's-
above
It's
the
right.
level of the park.
Right now, they're looking at a totally empty field.
Yeah.
And if you pace off where it's gonna be, you're gonna say, here's this empty field, there's this basketball court. But if the landscaping, the trees and so forth, the problem is that takes a while to go in. But if that's done properly, and it can be beefed up if that you think there's a need for it, that's where the emphasis should go right now. Moving, it's not, and if you move it, it's just gonna open up that space for the next amenity that someone decides to add anyway 5 years from now. And then you'll even have a bigger problem, so.
The other issue is, this project is, the bid is closed. I mean, it closed today.
Mhm.
And so, any change at this point, even just like moving it to the other side of the path, would require a change to the design. I mean, it's more than just moving the basketball court, they have to change the landscaping, the irrigation, I mean, everything.
So that's
Correct.
confirmed that if you change the court, move it 50 feet one direction, that will.
Significantly changes it.
Yeah, irrigation changes.
So the way,
Twice as much to do the same thing.
per the direction that we received at the last board meeting, this project had already been out for a construction bid, as is shown here, with construction detail documents. This irrigation head goes this way with this much water pressure squirting at this plant. I mean, that's how specific the construction plan gets. So we were able to issue basically addendum or ask contractors to say, okay, lump the amenities for that basketball court together so we could easily deduct them from the plan. And then what we would do is we would somehow value engineer, if it came down to that, now this area, because all these have drain systems that tie together to keep the water flowing this way. The entire irrigation system works with this plan. So it would definitely pump the brakes on what we're doing and probably extend that timeline. And then we would need to, we wouldn't put in, this is a post-tension slab really thick because the soils aren't that great. So we would have this void here, and we would probably just work with the volleyball court, and maybe you just kind of nix this out and fill it in with landscaping or native grass and just kind of change up the irrigation.
If you're saying if you took the court out, basketball court out.
Correct.
But then if you did that, you'd still have to reopen the bid, right? Because that's gonna change, because the bid should be lower.
We've already asked those guys to consider that.
Okay.
So it's a deduct item. So when we received bids this afternoon, we were able to pull out the basketball court, and I'll have that number for the board in the cover memo.
What was that number?
And it's 48,000 to 50,000. Because really the basketball court's just this post-tension slab is really all your cost is. Now there'll need to be, we didn't go back to irrigation design. It would be too late in the game and it would cost us significant to have design concepts go and redo the irrigation design. So we would have to start to, when we're out there in the field, start to figure some of that stuff out.
It's gonna cost you that much more.
So
to
I have a
redesign.
question.
Correct.
And I have one too.
Yeah, before we get too bogged down in redesigning this park, first of all, how many people came to the trustees meeting and commented? I haven't had
It
a
was
chance.
probably, what, like
4 or 5.
Half a dozen, yeah, it was.
Yeah, and to be clear,
Did they
Probably
all comment
half
on
of
moving the
those-
basketball court?
No.
so a couple of them, like I said, had some other comments about the parking loop, about, some concerns over, like not having enough like teen amenities, but they all jumped on board the basketball. So that was
It's
the
the
common
same group
thread.
So we had
that was
6
on the
people
CAC
But
who
board.
came
a
to.
couple of those, at least 2, if not like 3 of those 5 or 6 that commented, have been part of this process. They only like 1 or 2 of them had not been to any previous meetings regarding this parking. So the fact that they are trying to, some of them tried to say that there wasn't enough public process is kind of hooey, because most of them were actually part of the public process.
I guess my comment is, I wanna come back to what Jim said. We had a very, very deep, I mean, we almost annoyed ourselves. We took this public process so long. We've done reiterations on this. I am very disappointed in the board, and that they would consider changing this because 6 people came to a meeting. We had hundreds of people who participated in this, who gave us feedback. We've had this out. It went past the planning commission. It didn't get stopped at the planning commission. And because they didn't get what they wanted, I mean, this is just crazy to me that we would stop this over the comments of 6 people. If we are going to stop this, then we need to reopen the entire process, because it is totally inappropriate to change this park because 6 people out of 12,000 people in the city of Superior disagree. And I will come to the board meeting and I will say, guys, why did you have us go through this process if you're going to stop it because of 6 people?
Well, and I've talked to various people in the neighborhood that, that the phased park had so much in it, and when we went back to what we have now, everyone's like, what happened to all the amenities? So it's like, now we're taking away what little is
they have left.
And people were very concerned when we were down to the basic minimums to meet the budget, and the budget was lifted, and, the board realized that there was a lot of amenities that people wanted, that we're trying to accommodate.
And another thing, by the way, is that basketball courts are one of the most needed amenities in this town, and there are very few places where we can put them. I mean, I'm on the HOA, we have problems all the time with people trying to put in hoops and so forth on the streets and in their homes, which there are restrictions on. So, and actually, our biggest problem area is Tories. We have a lot of issues up there with that. So, we need it. There are very few places where we can put them. They should be distributed. We have one in Founders, which is very popular. We have one at Colton behind me, which is very popular. And by the way, basketball courts, I mean, because I observed this one, and by the way, that one goes into the night too, because there's parking lot lights. It's not, the court's not lighted, but there are lights in the parking lot, so there's enough light there that, people will stick around and shoot hoops into the night. But you get people of all ages, you get, fathers with daughters, kids, you get pickup games on the weekend, it's a great recreational amenity, which I don't need to tell you, but I just would remind you that it's a terrific asset that we really need in this town, and you really can't build a parking lot on a basketball court.
Well, and I would add too that it's not just used for basketball. I see scooters on
Right,
there, there's
absolutely.
Foursquare riders, there's little bike riders.
They train
There's
bikes.
all kinds of activities. So my suggestion would be leave it in, take the hoops out, and put the hoops in later, if that's really the issue. If we really wanna go down that road, I wouldn't take out the amenity per se, but change it in such a way that we still have it, or put silent basketball.
Well, I'm confused on the noise. Are they specific about the noise? Is it the bouncing, or is it that people are gonna be gathering there? That's what, because I'm
Because
thinking,
people are gonna
are they
gather.
worried at night that teenagers are gonna hang out?
Doesn't happen.
It's not gonna be
Yeah.
lit, and the park will not be
It's
lit.
not lit.
It's a
It's
club
not
that
lit.
does park.
They're more likely to gather in the gazebo than
Yeah.
right basketball.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
so it's not lit and,
Yeah.
I mean,
So So, I mean, just to wrap this up, because I mean, we kind of off agenda at this point, but,
Do you have a question?
um,
Because I don't think everyone's had a chance on the committee to
okay,
speak
well, yeah,
or
anyone
ask
else?
questions.
So one of the questions I had was it lit? And you guys answered that it's not lit, so if there's no light there, people aren't really gonna be doing that. Second question is, does it close at night or is it gonna be always open?
Parks,
So it's
all
closed,
parks in
right?
town.
So there, you know, if they're really worried about a noise concern during the evening or early morning, the park's closed. Second, I mean, the thing that I'm coming back to, if they're complaining about the basketball, but they're also complaining about the parking lot, why is the basketball optional but the parking lot's not? What's the difference? If they're complaining about both those, why would they say, okay, the basketball court could be optional but the parking lot's not? If they're complaining, those 5 people are complaining about both of them, then they should be equally treated, right?
Parking is so heavily debated, scrutinized, discussed.
Well, I know, but I'm not.
He's
I'm
making
not-
a-
I'm just making a point.
Yeah.
I think it's, I agree with everybody on the board. I think it's idiotic. I think it's a necessity that we have that because, you know, when I first came in here, when we were talking, when I first heard about this, the biggest argument was, hey, we don't have any basketball courts south of Colton Road, and kids have to travel across Colton Road. And believe me, we have to travel across Colton Road, and if I want my kids to play basketball, I have to take them, because I'm not letting them cross the street by themselves, like that street alone. So I get it, and I want it there, you know, personally. So I think my personal opinion is it's idiotic to remove that.
Anyone else? So.
And by the way, can we bring 8 people and say we want it? Because I can get 8 people.
Well, and so that is kind of, rather than try to make this a reverse public comment of we want the basketball court, I just kind of want to get a head nod from the committee that everyone's in favor of me representing PROSTAC to just get up there and remind the board of the public process and how we arrived at having the basketball court in there, and that if they wish to remove it, that they don't just do it based on 5 people in public comment when it was an agenda item. They open it back up properly as an agenda item so that all can comment. I mean, I want to just leave it that simple.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I still have to say, you know, I think it's important to be, I think being appointed to these committees, it's our duty to like hear the voice and take the voice and understand when that sort of is the originating voice of dissent and when it has the opportunity to magnify into something because it's important. I do not believe this is that. I do not believe this is a big travesty that is happening in this park. I think it sets, so I think we listen to the voice. I think this is ludicrous. I mean, I'm having a visceral reaction to this. I'm trying to be objective. This is not in my backyard politics. That is just so unbelievable. But we should expect it, and I think we've done a really good job to listen and really handle it well. So the other thing is, I think this could set an unbelievable precedent in our community for nothing to get done. Because how does anything get done if something like this happens when we're in bidding? I mean, you can forget about this town center because I might walk in and say, boy, that's a few too many. I already have a hard time at the roundabout in the morning going to work, and boy, that's gonna really plug it up. I'm not really down for this. So could you guys, I don't know, I know I'm being silly, but I think it sets a terrible precedent.
Well, I would suggest one thing maybe, and I'm gonna do this, is that I think because everybody seems to be having the same visceral reactions, everybody seems to be very emotionally tied to this, that more of us who can show up with Peter at the town meeting, you know, you get PROSTAC, not just Peter showing up, but you get PROSTAC showing up, and we're all sitting there, and when Peter stands up, we're with him, you know. That's gonna send a strong message that we are all in not just agreement, but we are in, you know, vehemently agreement, you know, with this, so I try to keep it.
I do not
Obviously feel very strongly
I do
you're
not
using
see
the big words
justification
tonight.
to change this. I do not see it.
All right.
Peter, one other thing that there was a comment that was said at least once, if not a couple of times, was that this is redundant, that there's basketball hoops and courts in school. Darryl made a good point that you can't play on the basketball courts during the day that the school is in session, but also I think those basketball courts are lower.
Well, they have the kid ones, and then they do have some, I think, full-size ones, but they're not regulation courts. They're just hoops.
They're not
They're,
courts.
they're not courts at all. They don't maintain them,
They're
and
horrible.
about half the time, they're not open to the public because the school is using them in the summer camps are using them.
It's a
The-
public park.
You kind of have to
School isn't a
remove,
public park.
yeah, you have to remove the schools from the parks. You can't say that that the schools serve the function of the parks. Because yes, they do at times, but there's severe limitations as to how they fill the need of the parks.
So the point, I think you should address that as well, because that was brought up, we've heard that more times.
Yeah, the same thing, I understand they brought up the issue of people can put up basketball hoops, but they really can't, I mean, it's heavily restricted, and where they can, so many people don't have the driveway, or they're on hills, they create dangerous situations, we're out to minimize the amount of times that people have to go to the street to play basketball.
Yeah, I mean,
in
how many-
unsafe facilities.
How many permits do you guys get for, or, do
We
you
don't-
guys deal with the basketball games?
Yeah, but you see
All the
what,
time?
we don't.
Most people don't get permits.
Most, if it's
Well,
on.
some of us live in
Well, you
communities
don't-
where you can't
you
have
put-
a basketball
right,
court.
just so you know,
can't have one
you can
inside.
put a portable,
It's a problem, right?
you can put a portable unit on your driveway, but that's it. But what a lot of people do is they put them in the street, because the street tends to be flatter and that sort of thing. And technically, they should be allowed the street, because they obstruct the street. The ordinance says you can't do that.
Right.
But the town does not enforce that. I'm not saying they should, I'm just saying they don't.
And I mean, the HOA deals a lot with the nuisances of them falling down and people not picking them up, like leaving them out and they become an eyesore and that type of thing, you know, much like
But my point is that many houses, many driveways, many streets
don't accommodate.
can't accommodate them because of the grade and all that.
Well, and
The only thing I'd like
other-
to see added to this whole comment is the fact that this is like the least minimal thing of all the things we saw.
Right.
I mean, this is nothing, this is,
Yeah, what if the amphitheater?
from my personal
building?
viewpoint, not to get personal, this is embarrassing.
Well, and that will be part of my comment, is to remind the board of the amenities that were in there that were removed. And then some of those include things like the amphitheater. And, you know, you would have been talking about potentially having, you know, electrified noise coming out of that.
Let's not forget that that could have been a school, or that could have been a rec center.
I've said that before, and I've kind of been told not to bring that up anymore, but exactly, I mean, that.
No, when they bought their houses, they had every expectation that they're, what?
That was supposed to be the high school.
Right. There was every expectation that something was going to be there that wasn't gonna be open
And
space.
you don't buy a house near a school and have it be silent. I mean, you don't, and they're not that far from the school, so are you gonna go ask the school not to bounce their basketballs? I mean, it is crazy.
Well, I think Corbett made a good point. As many of us as can show up on Monday night, I think that would be a good thing, so,
And-
I plan to be there,
Yeah.
so.
So just to close out this update item, Patrick, do you want to just speak to the bids were closed today, so
Yep.
that's going to be seen by the board on Monday, correct?
Correct, and just as a really quick follow-up, at this group's April 15th meeting, you guys actually made a similar recommendation to the board in reaction to the first $2 million park, concerned about all the amenities being removed. And I can't remember if you and I spoke about that. But the committee would like to unanimously express concern to the board specific to the following design areas: absence of planned parking, lack of amenities within the park that were identified during the public engagement process, lack of restrooms. This is when we had pulled the restrooms out in the design. And then concern to, at that point, an over excessive tree and planting material, because for $2 million, that's about all we could fit in there. So, and then.
I would just be prepared that if there is, and I think the board, I expect the board would support what PROSTAC is saying, but the only other thing to look at, if there is still concern, is to add to the buffer, add to the screening through landscaping and so forth. So you,
And what's interesting about that is we had same residents at the previous meeting requesting that we not plant material behind those houses to obstruct their views of the east.
that's right.
So now we were in a position where we were trying to space trees out in between properties to make sure that views were, so it is, at some point, And I can tell you, it's not represented here, but this will be probably the most aggressive planting plan you will see in terms of shrubs, bushes. The over excavation that's gonna need to take place is gonna be able to be kept on site to make low-level berms that will have planting to immediately deflect the noise from the courts. I mean, there'll be a lot of buffer. So, as Peter mentioned, we put this out to bid. We had, the closing was today at 3 o'clock, so the board can review a contract on Monday evening. We were asked to make the basketball court kind of an alternate item or an optional item, which we were able to do. Bids came in. The apparent low bid was actually around $2.3 million, so below what we were anticipating with the budget. The high end was around 2.7, which is where we thought there would be. The turnaround time was really, really quick on this bid, so I think just we're anticipating probably some change orders, so it's better to be a little bit under as opposed to being over. But actually, when this meeting's over, we'll go back to reviewing what was submitted, and we're gonna work through tonight to make a recommendation to the board to be included in the packet.
So Patrick, you said that there's no bathroom in the park?
There is,
There is.
correct.
That was the previous.
The
I just-
iteration, the $2 billion grass
That's
has
just
no
not
wall.
accurate. All right, so let's get into the agenda. So first agenda item is the Coal Creek Crossing Trail. For those of you who were at the meeting last month, we talked about this at length. So I'm hoping we can keep this pretty succinct. We seem to be in agreement that the proposed trail in the final development plan that goes from east to west that connected into original town, PROSTAC seemed to be in favor of recommending that be removed. And then the north-south trail would remain. Just so everyone is aware, OSAC made their recommendation last week, and they recommended that both the north-south and the east-west trail be removed.
Why do they want to move the north-south trail?
They seem,
There wasn't a lot of justification given. It's just there was an individual on the committee that was interested in not seeing any trails back there and thought that access from 3rd Avenue or further down Coal Creek was adequate.
Has this group been out there to see those trails where they would be?
not everyone.
Not as a group.
It's,
I see it every morning when I wake up.
if you haven't been there, you should go, because Patrick gave me the tour. I think the north-south trail needs to stay.
Well,
So I thought the north trail, south trail discussion was, it was off the table for even discussion.
well, that's the thing,
Well,
is
yeah.
my understanding from what the board asked us to revisit was the east-west trail. We weren't really asked to comment on the north-south trail. So I feel like that is an overreach on OSAC's part and would be an overreach on our part to comment at this time on the north-south.
Except that it would have to be extended. That trail was originally supposed to connect with the county trail. And we went through the county, county is very careful about how much access they allow to their trails. We went through all of that with them.
Mhm.
And they pushed back, but they eventually agreed to allow us to do it. And that, as I explained in the last meeting, the mistake was that we and I, at the time, because it happened very quickly, when that was put in front of us in one night, I thought that was the county trail. But if you take out that east-west trail, then that trail has to extend to the county trail.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it certainly doesn't make
Well,
any
it
sense.
does.
Peter, can you point out
Where it doesn't.
the trails, just so that I'm.
Okay,
Dark
so-
green across.
Can you pull up that PowerPoint that I sent you? 'Cause it
This is
shows
the
two trails.
east-west trail. It goes from original town, and then it would connect down to here. This is the north-south trail that comes from the southwest corner of Coal Creek Crossing Development, and it's gonna go down to connect to the county trail.
So when it juts to the west there, you're saying that's where it connects to the county trail?
Yeah, it goes off the screen there and it connects to the county trail. And,
Maybe you
and
can realign that, but
So it's really right in that room.
Yeah, have something there.
it just go along that edge there.
Because
in my mind, the only benefit at this point of the east-west trail would be it would help highlight that Hague Homestead.
Yeah, and I would
But
end it right at the Hague Homestead,
that's the only
coming from original town, but the one going across, they don't need that.
So, I mean, if anyone wants to comment, you're welcome to, but I think we had covered it pretty well in the last meeting that we can just make our motion to remove the east-west trail. But, I mean, feel free, anyone right now, to, if you want to further add to the conversation.
Peter, the only, comment I make would be really to Patrick, that when this goes to the board again, I still think you'd be better served to show the county trail and make it clear how all of this is gonna work, because this just doesn't show it, so.
I did an overlay. I sent you an email with.
There we go.
or there.
I just needed to pull it from one area to the other.
There you go.
Let's look at the fuzzies.
No, there's 4 owls out there right now.
Is that your picture?
Where are the lights? No, there's 4 owls out there. Those babies made it. Yeah, I actually just recorded them.
Oops. Which one do we look at?
There you go.
So you can see that they're basically parallel trails, and that if you do put that east-west trail, you've got trailheads within, I don't know, half a mile of each other, mile of each other at the most. There's no parking where that one comes out. There's no good reason to have that trail.
So as a original town resident, does it help you? I mean, is that cool
No,
for people that are there?
No.
No.
Not at all. Not at all. I think that the addition of that trail just adds confusion to people that are biking through there or walking through there. It doesn't do anything, and it really takes away from the corridor. I mean, we have destroyed so much of the habitats that are out there that if we can not continue to do that for this one little area, it would be amazing.
What do you think the reason for people to go on, if that trail were put in place, why would people want to go on it? To access the single tree trail?
Yeah.
Because it certainly looks like it'd be a lot easier to go down to the trailhead at the end of Third Avenue and get on it there, rather than go.
I think where the most use is probably gonna get at that east-west trail is folks walking their dog back in that back area, looking for a place for their dog to go potty. That's what's gonna be used for.
Which raises a good point, because a major concern when we looked at this originally and thought did not think that trail was gonna be there, was access from the homes at the south end of the development. And if you make that trail, I think where it is now, if it's too close to the homes, people are just gonna start making social trails to go down to it, which is what we wanted to avoid. If you're gonna put a trail anywhere there, you would actually wanna run it right along the back of the houses, for people to transverse that way. But I think with the one connection, although you're gonna have to show how it connects to Mayhawk.
Mm-hmm. And if you guys remember, that connection will be on the town with Boulder County once you cross that fence line.
Right.
Which one is that though? Right
So,
there?
kind of right here.
That's actually that is a ditch.
Irrigation ditch. Right, that was Boulder County and City of Boulder's recommended connection
To
point.
go right down the ditch.
Correct, on the
Yeah.
side of it.
There's an easement there, on 15 feet each side of the ditch, there's an easement. Whoever owns water rights has that easement.
Yep.
So goodbye frogs.
Goodbye frogs, goodbye tadpoles, goodbye crawfish, goodbye everything.
And to tell you the truth, as a resident of Old Town Superior, what's gonna be adequate? If we do away with the east and west trail, what's adequate? Why are we gonna have the north and south trail? I agree with OSAC. If we're gonna get rid of one, we need to get rid of the other. Because I have property, I live up there on the west side of town. Show me somewhere in Boulder County that has trails all the way around somebody, a private landowner that has property around there. I have a trail to the west of me, I have a trail to the south of me, I have a trail to the east of me now. It's gonna be put in, and as well as I got a walking trail outside as I come out my driveway, as I go home every night. People walking their dogs up and down the street. At 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night. There's people that run the Mayhawk Trail at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, sometimes 2 or 3 in the morning.
So can I just have a bit of
It's a pain, it's a
clarification?
hassle.
Mhm.
That trail that's gonna come off the end, not the one that goes this way, the one that's coming down this way, is there existing trail right now that it will link into, or
No, there's no existing trail.
Just to right here.
It'll link into this.
there, but there's nothing,
No.
that doesn't exist, where you're running the arrow right now,
It's
does
just
that
a
exist?
ditch.
Yeah.
It
No,
does
it's just an
exist, but it's a
irrigation
ditch, yeah, it's not a trail.
Okay, so if we do the trail off the end of Charles Street, we're really just going to a dead end anyway, cause it's not hooking into anything.
We've,
No, it'll.
Oh,
connect
it'll
to
we'll,
this.
we'll bring the connection
Oh,
down
you're saying
with
you'll
Boulder
bring the
County.
connection all
So
together.
this,
Okay.
this is on the approved FDP, so the developer is on the hook to build it, right? We could tell them,
Okay.
we don't want it.
And then the town of Superior would have to build the rest.
Yeah, with Boulder County, we'd probably use Youth Corps is what the plan would be. And if you guys kind of remember back, some of the discussion items we have is, you know, these homeowners have purchased these homes with the understanding that this trail, some trail would be there connecting to open space. So this group should absolutely recommend whatever it is you guys want to recommend. But remember, it'll ultimately be the developer that, the developer may very well decide that all this can go in, because he legally has that right to do so. It all could come out. I think they are looking for a little bit of guidance from the town. I do believe that they were in favor of keeping this trail so their residents had access somewhere to Mayhoffer, Single Tree.
Even though that's superior open space, they have a legal right to build a trail on there without our permission.
The approved FDP, so they already have the town's permission.
Well, and also, I mean, there was confusion obviously over this east-west, but, I mean, I've gone over and looked at the notes. We recommended, and the board adopted, that north-south connection to Mayhawker. So for us to renege on that now would be going back. You could do it if you really felt strongly, but I would advise against that. But also, this is in line, consistent with the town's comprehensive plan and the PROST master plan to provide trail access to as much of the residential communities as possible. You know, Sagamore, I've made this, Sagamore has really limited access. This whole area, you know, as you move north, has less access. You have to walk along roads like West Cold Creek Drive and so forth, or along streets through Richmond Town to get to the trailhead. So those are fine, but this is a very logical feature that's very consistent with the comp plan and the proposed master plan.
You're talking the north.
I'm sorry, the north-south,
Okay.
north-south, which is, we're already on record as recommending.
Yeah, I wasn't questioning that it shouldn't go in, I just wasn't clear on
Yeah.
what already existed or if it existed, that's all.
To me, I guess I go back to, you know, it's just the green circles and talking about trailheads and such. You know, throughout town, there's lots of places where there's connectivity from sidewalks and streets into a trailhead system, and I think that's a amenity that we need to continue to look at and provide, and that's part of the trail access plans that we wanna look at, and make sure there's interconnectivity, and I think that's a great option for all the people in that community, that there's a nice connection to that Single Tree Trail, that you're not walking down the road. You know, and the east-west, I agree that, you know, maybe it was just some remnants of the larger development that was there, because there is the Single Tree Trail and the double access there, and, you know, you're not getting that much, and it's a very short walk, it's easy to get to the other trails. So the east-west connection, to me, is not a great amenity, but the north-south seems like it ties the community without walking down the road. And then hopefully that alleviates some of the traffic in the front on the road.
That you guys are missing the picture here. I run a business 365, 24/7. I start diesel trucks at 2 or 3 in the morning to go to work.
Yeah.
What's the difference? I mean, honestly, what the difference is, I don't want that trail there. I don't want it there because I feel it's an invasion of my privacy. I've been in this town for 31 years, way before Rock Creek was, even here.
Right.
I feel we do not need the north-south trail because we have one farther to the west of the Kuffner development where I live.
Which one is that? What are you referring to, George?
We're referring to the north-south trail coming out of Remington Homes.
No, what's the one that exists over, what are you referring to?
Back there, the Mayhoffer Trail, it sits right back there.
Okay, you're talking about the Mayhawk.
Absolutely. I feel we don't need it. I feel, I don't want it. Neither does my relatives that want it up there. It's invasion on my privacy.
But it's outside of your
I understand,
boundary.
and you don't understand.
I mean, I don't have control over the trails
neither
in my
do I.
backyard.
Hey,
They're
but you
outside
moved
my
here, you bought a
property.
house here.
Exactly.
I was born here, I was raised here. I seen everything in this town change. I was promised a drink of water 31 years ago that I haven't even got yet. From a pub, from a tap, from the town. You don't think I'm a little upset about this or emotionally involved in this? You guys are totally wrong about this. I feel we don't need that north-south trail. If we're gonna do away with the east and west, we need to do away with all of it, period.
Well, I think as Jim was saying.
It might inconvenience you down there where you live. You don't think it's an inconvenience me?
Yeah, but we're just
But
trying to
there's a
have
whole new
discussion
development
again
right there that's
about-
totally changing that environment right there.
It's open space. It needs to be
Right.
left open. The town owns it, taxpayers own it, let's leave it open. Let's not.
But if
put
the
no trail.
taxpayers wanna use it, it's open space.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It is in the town's master
Well-
plan to allow accessibility to open space.
That's fine, I'll go get a petition and we'll get a petition started. If we pass this.
So it's
I'll
already
get-
been approved.
I'll go get a petition.
Well,
started.
yeah, exactly. I mean,
They
it's.
can go build it
So,
tomorrow.
well, I mean, so we have an impasse
Started.
on this
We'll get a
with,
petition started.
I don't think we have an impasse.
well,
think
no, I mean
we-
with one member. So I mean, we either make a motion to remove both or we make a motion to remove the east-west.
We weren't asked about the horse stuff.
That's
You just have to-
my feeling is we weren't asked
We
about
just
the
have to
north-south.
decide if we
But,
wanna bring it in.
but, I mean, the impasse is if we make a motion to remove both, like George is asking,
I'm making a motion to remove both.
I'm, you know,
Alright,
I
well,
would
the-
personally vote against that, and so that, I mean, you potentially are gonna have a denied motion.
So let's go, we gotta go through that process. So motion was made, so we need a second and then.
Motion to remove both north, south, and east,
Correct.
west. Alright, so all in favor to remove both?
No, he-
We need a
He needs
second.
Yeah.
Alright, second.
No,
Okay.
I'm not saying so. He
So
needs-
anyone second that motion?
Wow.
Okay. So then, let's put the motion on the table to remove just the east-west trail connection. Do we have a second on that motion?
Second it.
Alright, Darrell seconds, all in favor? All opposed? So
This is-
7-1.
So, procedural question.
Yep.
By seconding George, the amendment that George proposed, does that just put it to vote for
Mhm.
group?
Mhm.
So if I were to second the vote, does that put it out for,
This group would vote.
and we can vote thumbs up, thumbs down?
Mhm.
If it goes down, then.
You can vote again or change the language or continue to
And by
revise the
seconding
motion.
it, can I still vote against?
Yes.
Sure.
Absolutely.
You just wanna say, you just wanna hear what people have to say.
I would like to second,
Okay.
the,
He's gotta make,
He's gotta make.
proper protocol is he's gotta make the motion again. and then-
I make a motion again to get rid of the north-south trail and the east-west trails altogether.
I'll second.
So,
Okay,
just procedural, I'm just
sorry,
saying,
discussion.
you just voted to get rid of the,
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. If we're
So
just
that's
gonna get
already
rid of it
done,
all.
so now-
I'm so emotionally tied with this, Mr. Payne, that I
I'm not
can't even see
concerned.
it. This is.
I'm just saying,
this is-
I'm
this
just
is
talking.
ridiculous.
okay, so let's,
All you need to do
George's
now is
motion
discuss.
is on the table again. Aaron is to remove both the north, south, and the east, west.
You can't,
Aaron has seconded it.
you can't.
Just the north-south.
North-south.
Just-
Well, we'll
I
have
make a
the-
motion to
we'll
get
have
rid of
both
the north-south
motions on the-
trail.
We'll have
Right
both
there,
on the
at
record.
Remington Crossing. I
So-
make a motion, north-south trail to be gone. Who seconds it?
I'm seconding the motion.
Aaron second. All in favor?
Well, you should have
That's
this
discussion.
discussion.
Discussion. All in favor of George's motion? Opposed? Okay, so 1 for, 7 against George's motion, and then previously we had a motion for just the east-west trail, 7-1.
So now does it get, so it gets, there's two
Both
things.
motions are on the record.
So now both, so that's the thing that's important to you, is that,
Yes.
that the other motion, if the opposite, what you wanted to happen is that actually the motion to get rid of that was voted down, which means that we're all in favor of it. That's what's really the message.
Yeah, I understand that, I understand that. But she didn't vote.
Oh, I'm not on the
Where's
board.
your-
She's not.
Where's the other lady? I'm sorry. Where's the other lady?
Lindsay's out.
Lindsay's out.
So both are on the record, they'll be in the minutes, and so the board will see that we voted on both motions.
Do we send a formal recommendation to the board?
Yeah, well.
It'll be included in
Well,
the
right, it'll
meeting
be
minutes, yep.
separate, I mean, the only thing, when we do the minutes, I can, Sandy and I can deal with the language of it, but we'll just add the language that we discussed last month, which was, you know, we wish to remove the east-west trail because we don't see the need to access the original town and the fact that it would disturb the habitat. All right, moving on. The 2016 trail recommendations were, this I see that we're mostly going to look at tonight, not necessarily the list, but just kind of review where we stand with the 5-year trails plan. Previously, we've had the 5-year trails plan divided by year with the dollar amounts. And so we had a budget for each year, but there was no actual budget for the trails in any given year. I mean, that was always just kind of an arbitrary number that was given, but there was never any actual money allocated towards building those trails. So the way we kind of talked about last year about how we want to change this year is the way that we come up with our amenities priority list is each member will get the list of amenities, and then you would vote on whether it's a high, low, or medium priority, and you would also vote on what is your top 3 amenities. And then the chair would take that's all done outside of the meeting. We do that between the meetings. It would get emailed out for those of you who haven't been through this process before. Then the chair would take those, you rank, you know, a high with a 1, a medium with a 2, a low with a 3, and then the lowest score, you could do the reverse, so you get the highest score, would end up at the top of the list, and so on. So you get a list of the amenities from, say, 1 to 20, 1 being the highest, and so on. We were talking about doing the same with the trails this year. So we would individually vote on what's the priorities for the trail, and then we would use the methodology to calculate that and come up with a list for prioritizing 1 down. And theoretically, OSAC is going to use the same exact methodology. And that way, PROSTAC will have its list, OSAC will have its list, and then we can combine the data for the 2 committees to come up with a joint list. At that point, each committee can look at the joint list and say whether or not we agree with it being a valid joint list. We can negotiate with, the 2 committees can negotiate a little bit and decide, well, we'd actually like to see the trail that's listed number 3 be moved to number 5 or whatever. And hopefully we can come to consensus on a joint list, so then the board only receives 1 5-year trails plan. If we can't come to an agreement with the 2 committees, then we would just put forward, PROSTAC would put forward its list, OSAC would put forward its own list, and the board, like in previous years, would get 2 lists, and they would have to decide on how they want to consolidate the 2 lists. So that's where we stand from how we were going to change the method from previous years.
Here's just a quick, for those of you who've gone through the amenities prioritization, here's a quick just reminder of what that sheet looks like.
The other thing would be, we are going to remove the year assignments for trails. So we're just going to have a list that goes 1 to 20 or whatever, you know, whatever it is, how many ever the trails are. So in theory, any given year, you would be picking off the top of the list if the budget would allow it, rather than having a trail that says it's for 2016 and another trail says it's 2017. You would just be picking off the top of the list. So whatever's the highest priority gets knocked off, and then you go down. Obviously, given budget numbers, you might end up picking a low dollar amount trail from lower on the list, get it done in an earlier year. That type of stuff can still happen, but we would essentially remove that the actual 5-year schedule and just say this is our priority list.
And the benefit of that is things that weren't on the previous 5-year list, something new that came up that's like, oh, we want to prioritize this higher, now get on the list sooner, like the Coyote Ridge thing, where before, if it wasn't in a 16, 17, or 18 and it got added, it wouldn't be added till later, but now it can get reshuffled in.
Exactly. I mean, it was the way that things got on a year in the 5-year plan was relatively arbitrary. So we would basically be removing that, highly subjective method. Yeah, and go more based on priority than based on year. So that said, one of the things I think we need to address tonight is look at the previous 5-year trails plan, as well as look at what we had recommended in the 2016 budget as trails that we had prioritized, and see whether or not we see any trails that need to be added. Like you're saying, are there any trails that we've missed that we'd like to add to the list, so that they're on there when we start the process this year?
May I ask a question, because I'm new to all this, but one of the reasons I got on here was because I feel very passionately about parks and recreation and having kids be active as an educator and as a parent. So this committee is deciding what's important, because there was a big survey done and then the public was asked, right? So how is this working?
All right, so I'll answer that in 2 ways. One, another part of this trails discussion tonight that we need to have is how we want to engage the public this year on trails, especially if the town is looking at spending north of $500,000 this year on trails. It's very important that we not just go off of OSAC and PROSTAC's priority list, that we get some type of input from the public. So whether or not that's going to be a formal survey, if it's just going to be part of some public meetings, that's what we need to discuss.
In the future, there was things like at the Chili, there was a booth and people would come up and we'd talk about trails and, just a little questionnaire. So there was other community engagement depending on where and how.
We've done some informal things to judge the public's interest.
So
The problem with that is, were you in town for the Chili Fest? I mean, I would, being around, the neighborhood and everything. Okay, I guess a lot of us were naive, but in my neighborhood, we thought we were getting a rec center. And then when the survey went out, we thought we were really getting a rec center. So when we found out we weren't getting a rec center, we're like, what? I thought we were getting a rec center. We thought the park. And I hear all the things you guys did, but honest to goodness.
So this is just an advisory committee. This was actually the group that worked with the consultant to put the survey together, and then all this group does is recommend and pass information on to the town board.
Then I asked for data, because I love data.
Yep.
And I was told, we're still combing through it, yet decisions were being made, and so I just want us to make database decisions, not we talk to the neighbor or everyone I know wants a rec center. I want real data. And I combed through the survey, and I didn't run it through any kind of Excel sheet or anything, but I read every comment and everything. I just really feel like we need, and I might be mishearing, but what I think I just heard was this committee gets to prioritize, and I would like to see it be put out to everybody so we really know what the community wants. And I feel like we're lacking in really some basic amenities that a town should have. I would like to see it get addressed, which I thought the survey, in my opinion,
Well,
was
so
clear.
just to speak to the survey real quick, ultimately any decision lies with the board. And just kind of off the record, different board members have very different interpretations of survey data. And so, to some people, it's very clear what the survey said, but even among board members, they disagree over that. So ultimately, it doesn't really matter what the survey says, it matters how the board makes a decision.
But a survey's just a survey, and we still have to fund those
Yeah,
things. And
so a
that's
lot of
one
that,
piece
yeah, a lot of
No, I
that.
get you, but I was just looking at this and it said indoor pool, and I'm just seeing other
If
things
that was
that
just
don't even do
questions
with
we're being asked.
trails.
versus-
Okay,
So and a big concern of the board is whether or not it could actually be funded. And that's where the survey and any kind of rec space lies today, is it kind of, in all honesty, died on the vine. And that happened previously too, but so, with the trails, yes, I mean, everyone on OSAC and PROSTAC is appointed by the board. And so there's some weight in that we're voting in the best interest of the town and not necessarily ourselves. So we're involved and we are hopefully making decisions that are generally representative of the residents.
Well, I think that's the key, is that the town does their best to appoint members to PROSTAC and OSAC, who are supposed to be a representative of the town itself. And we are representing the town, so there's different inputs to, my understanding, to the board's approval process is the PROSTAC submits their recommendation, which is a representative of the town. OSAC does the same thing, representing the town, but from a slightly different viewpoint than the PROSTAC, but very much kind of overlapping the same. Then there's also the surveys that come in, and they take those three things together, and that's when they make their approval or whatever they're voting on. So they take all those inputs and that's when they come to their conclusions.
And even
so
PROSTAC
even when
itself.
if you are here, we do a lot of public comment to help. If there's something that you want the board to hear while we're doing this, publics are welcome to make public comment for us to weigh into our decision as well.
And that's exactly what I was just going to say, is the members of PROSTAC are also taking what we hear from the community, whether it's, just us talking to the neighbors, whether it's us doing formal public engagement, attending town board meetings and hearing public comment. I mean, there's lots of resident input coming in, even if it's not in the form of a formal survey, that is helping us form our recommendations. But ultimately, even we are not making any decisions. We're making a recommendation to the board, and the board is making decisions. So part of what we're doing is process that's been done year after year, and part of it is, like I said, we are going to discuss some ways to do public engagement this year. So we'll take in new information this year in making our trail priorities this year, our amenity priorities this year. We might even do some public process again on amenities, but in a way we just did do that with the survey last year.
And I think to make a specific example, I believe this, correct me if I'm wrong, that the Coyote Ridge, the reason why it was even brought up was because of discussions with the public at one of the events, and people were asking about it. We brought it to the attention, and the board went, oh, now it's actually it's even on our agenda tonight, I believe. So that's a specific example where the board wasn't even, the PROSTAC wasn't even looking at that until the public addressed it and it came on our radar, and now it's part of the agenda tonight.
Generally, it comes from the board to us.
Yeah, I just get,
But then we send it back.
I get concerned when I hear, we were at an event and we heard comment. Anybody who deals with anyone, you could hear 20 comments and feel like the whole world thinks like that, and then when you do a survey, you go, oh, you really don't. That's where I think we need to be cautious, is making decisions based on what our friends, usually your friends think like you do, right? So, or people around your neighborhood. I would just like to see things be a little more formal. As a resident, I'm just kind of disappointed I was disappointed with the survey and how the results were really, truly presented. And
They were presented.
they were
But I think what she's expressing is what seemed like there were some clear messages from the survey, but they didn't get viewed by the board in that way. But that, I mean, that's inevitable with this process.
And they
That's
keep it at a
independent of what we're
simple
doing,
level.
right?
Because when you get to the board level, you start dealing with the politics of it.
Right, I get it, I've been on lots of boards, and
And the
I
money.
get it,
I
yeah.
mean,
Yeah, because
if
you're,
the
last
whole
year,
town
That's
says,
right.
Funding.
No
they're
funding.
more
looking at,
skyscraper, but we don't
they're
have
looking
money
at
to pay for it.
taxes,
That's
they're
what
looking at
board looks
everything. And so there's a lot more involved on the board level than we do.
Can I ask a question? So for that specific example, was the results of the survey presented independent of PROSTAC, or did PROSTAC present that survey?
No,
There's a
the
statistician.
Yeah,
statistician
so-
that
so my point-
conducted the survey presented.
Okay, so that's exactly my point. My point is that even if there is a survey, it's still independent of this board's recommendation. It's something that happens independent. It's a third piece of data that the town receives from an independent source to weigh against the recommendation of this board and the other board. Or, excuse me, board advisory committee.
And, you know, we may choose to do some type of survey for trails this year. I mean, we can talk about that. It would, at this point, there's no budget in this year for a proper, you know, consultant or survey. Though we could go to the board and ask that they, you know, contribute some budget towards doing a formalized survey. So whether or not we would get the level of the survey that they did for the indoor space, I don't know. Or we could just try to do some type of survey monkey survey.
I was gonna say, can we do like a survey?
Again,
monkey just
that
to-
might not be statistically relevant data in the
Right.
end.
I
You
don't
might not
think
get
you're
it
gonna have a lot of
back.
pushback on trails, and I'm asking general questions, I'm not
Okay.
asking specific to trails.
But that's some of what we need to talk about is, do we wanna go to the board and ask that we formalize a process this year for trails, especially if they are really talking about spending as much as $500,000 in trails this year, like they might. Then maybe that is a little bit above our heads that we should be relying more on the public and we should have a formalized process to do that. Or we can talk about just, we wanna do public engagement, we wanna do a survey monkey, we wanna use the engaged superior, do some more informal methods of collecting feedback. So
The question I have is if we
we
did a
can
little
talk
bit more,
about that right now.
if we did a little bit more formal process, would it just be PROSTAC, or would we try to enforce that in OSAC to follow a more formal process as well? Because it doesn't make sense if one group did and one group didn't.
So we need to be very cooperative in my eyes with OSAC and PROSAC because technically OSAC's involvement with trails is limited to open space. And very few trails that are being proposed are actually on town open space. They're mostly interior developed open space, or they're along the road right of ways, like on the castle and stuff like that. So I think we should work with OSAC on all the trails, but PROSAC really needs to be the lead because it's really in our purview more so than theirs. So anything that's done with the trails, the two committees should be working together on. We shouldn't be working independently of each other. And just to kind of jump down, one of our other discussion items tonight is the leadership meeting with OSAC. I mean, this is one of the things we need to discuss with them. This is the primary thing we need to discuss with them is how we want to manage the trails, the 5-year trails plan, because like I said, we want to cooperate with them this year on that. How we want to work on any type of public engagement or survey on trails. That's the primary thing we need to talk about with OSAC leadership this year, or this first quarter.
Corbett, as a point of clarification, the board will review and potentially approve all committee work plans Monday night, and that item is on both PROSTAC and OSAC's work plan. That kind of cooperation. think as we've seen over the years, 5-year trails plan, Boulder County, open space and trail recommendations. And then I think what we heard last year from the board was adding in that public engagement element for the trail process.
And just to clarify what Patrick was saying, those are two separate things, the Boulder County recommendation and the 5-year trails plan. So the 5-year trails plan, we're just talking about trails that would be funded by the town. Separate from that, but not completely unrelated, is the Boulder County recommendations that we make, because those are almost always somehow connecting into the town. They're just on county open space.
Well, did that kind of help a little bit on the clarification, or did that muddle it a little bit?
It makes me understand how the process maybe worked or didn't work. I mean,
Yeah, I think the key is this group, through the approved work plan, will get their tasks to work on, and in certain cases are asked to interpret data and pass it on to the board in form of a recommendation, and sometimes it's just the process. So I think, and I would imagine some in this room are probably feeling the same way you do about that survey, is that this group, nor staff, nor a consultant was asked to interpret the data. We were just asked to pass the data on. And if I think I'm understanding you correctly, that may be where the disconnect is PROSTAC wasn't actually tasked with interpreting or passing the data on in form of a recommendation. It was just to conduct the public process piece of it.
so really then the question should be more directed to the board. Like,
I would
what do you
recommend,
with this
yeah.
data?
Yeah, I would
Three
actually recommend
decisions
public comment,
representative
yeah.
of what
Yeah.
the public said they wanted.
Yeah, if you really wanted to address, I think that the survey said this, and you could get, people that agree with you to do the same thing. Go to the board and say, why aren't we doing it?
I mean, I know how
I mean,
boards
that's-
work. You can go to a board with 20 people who are angry and then they decide it's a problem. But really, it could be 20 people in the whole community.
Well,
But I get it. I mean, that's not
I
kind of how I
wouldn't
want
even
it to
say,
work.
I wouldn't even say angry. The one thing that because we hear this all the time, or at least I do, in the last year as chair, of people coming to staff or to me and saying, something about an indoor pool or a rec center, and I will continue to say that the more the board hears about it, the more it's on their radar of this is something that people really want. So it's going to the board and expressing your interest in seeing this in your town is what the board needs to hear. I mean, that's what they're there to hear. They're there to hear what the residents want, independent of any survey.
I think the thing is holding them accountable. I mean, we asked your opinion. We asked the opinion of all the adults in the community. What did they think about the topic of a recreation center? And
And a
to be
library.
quite honest, yeah, and it's all kind of fallen off the edge of the table now. And so I don't think it is incorrect for you or anyone you know to come to the board and say, gosh, what happened to this?
Well, honestly, I was
Why
waiting
did this
for,
fall off
I
the
was, we
table?
got all the emails saying, take a survey, and you have this much time, take a
Yeah.
survey, and I was expecting and maybe I missed it, I'm not saying I didn't, we get busy, but I was expecting to have formal results, so that's why I waited I don't know, a year. And then I said, where are the results from the survey? Actually, I was on the 2nd grade field trip with my son when I asked you, where are the results of the survey? When are we getting our rec center? You're not, what? So, I don't know.
I mean, the results were presented in a board meeting, so yeah, you would have
I just thought it was gonna be we took a survey, we're also
attention.
gonna get an email saying.
Yeah,
here are
no,
the
you
results
would
of
have
the
had to
report.
be paying
I'm
attention.
sorry, I'm off
I was gonna
topic,
say,
I'm just,
just in the interest of time,
yeah.
a great discussion. I
I
really don't want to
gotcha,
stymie it,
yeah.
but I think we're kind of getting off
Yes.
topic
Yeah.
here, and
So-
we're way behind. It looks like so.
Yeah,
we
so,
can get back.
well, I would basically, I would close the trail discussion tonight, unless someone wants to, add any trails to the list tonight, which, Patrick, can you pull up the 5-year trails plan for next year?
Sure.
So unless anyone wants to add a trail to the list, I think we'll basically close the trail discussion with, does anyone have any input on how we think we want to handle public engagement this year? do we want to go to the board and say, we think there should be a formal process with a consultant that might involve a survey, that might just involve a consultant running some public engagement meetings like we've done in the past for some of the indoor space work, for Eldorado work, we've had the consultant come in and run some of those meetings. Do we wanna do a formal process like that? Do we wanna just proceed with handling our own public engagement meetings? Do we wanna do an informal survey like survey?
A question I have on that is, how long does a formal survey take? This is this year, and they have that money this year, and we do this formal survey, and it takes us through August or whatever. Are you really gonna get anything done?
Would it take us like 6 months?
It took us longer than 6 months to do the
So-
last
Just to get the questions right.
Just to get the
Yeah.
questions.
I would
So-
recommend we just try something simple, like a 2 or 3 question survey, just to see if anybody comes up with some ideas that we don't have.
Can we look at the map, just
You
to,
know,
Sure.
just where our trails are?
It's, to me, spending a lot of money on a formal process on this.
And,
Yeah.
and I know you
Takes away
say
from
it's
trails.
not
And it takes away from
scientific,
trails.
but
Yeah,
we do
it's
get
money that
community
we take
involvement
out of
by
building trails.
various activities. 4th of July booth, the Chili Fest booth, all those, we have the same question all the time, and it's always the same map. It hasn't changed over the years.
And we only have so much land in which to do it, and my hackles go up the minute we say a consultant and
Yep.
in my
Spending
opinion,
money,
wasting precious money that we could be spending on
Yeah,
trails.
Or
we don't
maybe-
have the money for the trail, though.
Yeah.
I don't disagree, I'm just
Yeah, no, we
weighing
just,
our
No,
options.
I'm
But that's
just-
only why I
I'm
said,
just-
if you
that's
put
why-
something
Yeah.
up on Survey Monkey, it gives people an opportunity to speak up, you publicize it
it's not
through-
formal, but it's more information you had to
It's
begin
more
with, which is always
information
better.
than that,
And
and
maybe
it
something
goes
that-
out in the newsletter, maybe we
gonna
can
reach
even
those
ask
for
the HOA to
2012.
send it out.
And maybe
I mean,
something.
just-
new.
And then the
just-
new pops
We'll get a
up.
plan
Just
and
to
a flyer
remind,
behind it.
I mean, just to remind everyone, we had some relatively good success, I believe, with the program assessment,
Mhm.
just using SurveyMonkey.
Yeah.
And not doing the whole, you know,
I'm
consultant
definitely,
route.
I'm
on
definitely in
doing this.
favor of not doing a formalized thing that's gonna take forever and spend money, but yet getting more data, because there is a significant amount of money like a Survey Monkey, that's why I'm really in favor of it.
Well, right, and Peter, you had a point, the fact that they want to explore, the idea of spending $500,000 is going out there. Even though it is open space money, and it's not, it's nice to have taxpayer input on it, even though it's just sitting there in a bank account, essentially.
Well, and, yeah, I mean, at that point, I think, not just the committees, but the board, it has a much more accountability to the public of, we just spent $500,000, we wanna make sure we're spending it the way that you, the public, wants to spend it. And so, to spend that amount of money without having any public input on which trails were prioritized to be done this year would be a mistake.
Can you give us an understanding of how big $500,000 is compared to what we've been spending for the last few years, each year? I mean,
Spending.
like an order of magnitude, yeah, exactly. So that's what I'm trying to say, just, to really, as a
Yeah.
clarification, say from nothing to, oh my gosh, we actually can do something, right?
I mean, at most, the town is, how much, like,
The
did the
trail
trail
funding-
at El Dorado cost?
Yeah.
I don't have exact costs off the top of my head, 100,000 plus, probably a little bit more.
Yeah.
Trail funds had been cut
Yeah.
in the previous 2 budget cycles and added back in. And the board is now considering loosening up a little bit some of those self-imposed restrictions on the open space tax. So this committee last year made the recommendation to fund like 7 of the trails, top trails on that trails priority list. So this would be a pretty monumental step. I would say in a
Exactly.
1-year project, this would be the most trails that this community has probably attempted to put in.
And
So
maybe
pretty
you
big
don't-
jump.
and you could even, maybe even couch it as saying, hey, it's gonna be more than the last, how many years combined?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Right. So that's
And I
why
think
was
Peter's
thinking-
right. I would say the last major trail was maybe the retaining wall across from El Dorado K8. And then that same year, I think that's the year we did the retaining wall up by Key Bank along McCaslin. Would have been the last major trail projects the town put in.
What about the one that went down, from the ridge, down on the?
Down the chasm on the
Yeah, on the east side.
east side of the chasm.
I mean, that one didn't have any retaining wall, but that was a big
Mm,
trail,
mhm.
and that was a great
Mhm.
connection.
Yeah.
So Patrick mentioned that we had made a recommendation last year for the budget. Our priorities were Coyote Ridge, trail maintenance and improvements. Fire Station Park west toward and along the Castling. And then the connection from Fire Station Park south to South Indiana. So that would be, the Calmonte development was supposed to, or is supposed to build the trail that would go along McCaslin, bordering their property, and then we would extend that down to South Indiana. Install a hard/soft trail north of Shamrock Drive for the Hodgkin Harris Reservoir. Both OSAC and us recommended that, but we both now kind of changed our minds on that and said, given the land area available to us, that isn't really a feasible expenditure.
And after we did this, didn't we come back toward the end of the year because the 36 improvements, the Marshall Mesa connection is a very unsafe connection that is a high priority that came back as one of the top?
You're correct.
Yes.
There was discussion after
After we
after
approved
the
5-year trail
after
plan,
it was
because
approved
then-
and submitted. It was kind of that ongoing dialogue as the priorities changed.
Yeah. We'd also said connection from along Colton Road near the Richmond property. That was just a little trail that, if anyone's familiar.
50-foot.
Install a soft surface trail parallel to McCaslin from the water treatment plant down the High Plains Drive. And then extend a soft surface trail connection along the west side of McCaslin by the Key Building. So basically from like Shan down to Rock Creek Circle. So those were our priorities. OSAC agreed with the ones running along the Castling. They agreed with Coyote Ridge, though they said extension or connection to Coyote Ridge. And I was trying to clarify that with Patrick about what they really meant, because what we've been talking about Coyote Ridge is, well, potentially adding to the trail network, but really just improvements of the existing trail. We had that little purple or Pirate Park connection into it. So I think that's what they were referring to, OSAC was. And then they had another one, from a single tree connection, right, Patrick?
I'd have to go back and look. I don't have it off the top of my head.
But basically our list overlapped with a couple differences. So we, again, we'll go through the process of ranking our trails. They'll go through their process and we'll see how it shakes out. But I think what we'll need to do first is discuss with them to nail down the methodology we both want to do for that 5-year trails plan. And also talking about the public engagement and how we want to proceed this year with public engagement. I think we can jump down quickly to Coyote Ridge because it's very much the same discussion. That one I see as the next step is definitely public engagement.
Yes.
That involves not just what do people want to see, but having a little bit of education to the public of, this is actually a mountain bike trail. this is what is actually the Coyote Ridge Trail, this is what are social trails. And getting an understanding of how it's really being used, because as we've talked in this room, that's really not being used as a mountain bike trail, it's being used as an off-leash dog trail. So again, another point of education of, that's not allowed, actually, in the town, is you can't be running your dogs off leash. So, trying to get a better understanding of how the public is using it, and how it should be used. And from there, we can kind of figure out, well, do people really wanna see it as a mountain bike trail again? If so, what are the improvements they would like to see to it? Are there connections? I mean, we talked about the one from Pirate Park into it, but are there any other connections that people would like to see that would maybe take existing social trails and make them actual town trails to connect into there? I see that as the first step, is we need to have some type of public engagement. And that would probably not be a survey, that would very much need to be a discussion to really get feedback. But I see that as being something we should be scheduling within the first couple months of this year to jumpstart this process. I also see Coyote Ridge as one of the primary things we should talk with the board at the dinner we have with them next month.
How much of Coyote Ridge is Superior and how much is level 3? How much can we actually affect?
All of it is actually, the official trail is all Superior. Basically goes up to the border, right?
There's lots of trails off of there.
Okay.
The social trails are what goes on to level 3.
Okay.
And that's part of the
Education.
education is letting residents know that what trails we can and cannot actually maintain.
How big a loop is it? A loop?
It's a loop.
I run it on the weekends, it's like 4 miles if you go around that. Well, I should
You're
say I do
talking-
level 3.
You're talking about
Yeah, you do level
just,
three.
just Coyote Ridge
Coyote
would
Ridge is
probably
like a
be
half a mile.
like a
No, it's more than a
mile.
mile. It's
not
more
very
than a mile.
much.
It's not it's like I wanna say it's probably just a hair under a mile and a half, or close to a mile and a half, one way, you go
One way.
out and back, and it's almost 3.
So you lollipop
But
it?
if you go from Pirate Park today, you walk, are you familiar with Pirate? with that?
Yeah.
And it basically, you can walk straight up the hill, almost all the way to 128.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
that's
I
social.
And
Yeah,
that's
that's
social.
social.
From the
That's
pool.
social. You
Yeah.
can take a right and, you know,
It's
you
still
can go
social
all the way
along
over to
128
Yeah.
to the chasm, yeah.
I'll
It's an
say that-
awesome thing, there's a couple of nice.
Yeah,
Daryl,
no,
these
it's-
areas in here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that, like Corey's saying, is like 4 miles.
It's like 4
probably,
miles.
If you did the whole,
If you did the whole loop.
Yeah.
the whole social trail loop.
And how much of it can we actually affect and do improvements on? Just the mile?
I would say
Like a
you
mile.
can,
That zone.
you could impact anything within this area
And
here.
there's a lot of additional little community trails down into the ravines that back
Yeah.
up, and
Correct.
there's a lot of bike path traffic in
A
there.
lot of kids, some,
If you
are
zoom
using
in,
community trails to walk to
you
school.
get social
We see
trails.
that.
Yeah, if you zoomed in, you can see the social trails.
Oh, really?
They're pretty clear.
So,
You can kind of see it.
to just elaborate a little bit on
There's
Peter's
right
comment
there.
about educating the public, it's funny is that,
There we
so that's my backyard is Coyote Ridge, so I see people all the time, I was talking
How's
to a lot of
that?
folks.
Right there.
And
Yeah. Leave it there.
the interesting thing is they actually, it's different if they thought, well, I'm just letting my dog off leash and I know I'm not supposed to, but no, they actually believe that that's the only area in Superior besides the dog park where they're allowed to let the dog off leash. It's really, that's the education needs to be, because they believe that, no, that they're actually allowed to, that they're not breaking any ordinance by letting the dogs off leash there. So that's why education there is gonna be a huge thing, because they think, I guarantee you folks are gonna think that we're trying to take away their right to have a dog off leash there when they don't realize it's not even allowed.
Yeah.
So,
We receive more complaints about dogs off leash, dogs waste, aggressive dogs, and aggressive people out of Coyote Ridge than anything.
Oh, yeah.
Hands down.
if you take away my wife, how many do you get?
Yeah.
No, I mean, anyone
No, she's
that
probably one pulling all the time.
frequents those trails, and knows about them can tell you that it's the social trail network and the dogs are both pieces of information that people know nothing about. that, like you said, that people think they can run their dogs and they can't. And people think that certain trails are town trails and they're not.
The other thing that's very interesting, which because of last week brings it into home, is Coyote Ridge. See that little reservoir right there? Coyote Ridge has a couple social trails walking to that reservoir where, last week over in Parker, right, the 3 kids, one of them died. I see kids all the time walking
On the ice.
on the ice from that social trail on Coyote Ridge all the time from my backyard, yelling at them to get off that because
And there even is a sign
it's
on
crazy.
that
Yeah,
little pond that says, keep off the ice.
And I think it's well, it's just shallow. It can't happen. But when you look at Parker, that was only 12 inches of that. It was fairly shallow, and the kids slipped under the ice and couldn't get out.
So, again, I think the main thing we need to decide there, and we don't necessarily need to decide tonight, but we do need to decide soon, is how we want to start a public engagement on that. I mean, do we want to just schedule a meeting that we're just going to run ourselves?
Do we have money?
No.
Okay, then we probably gotta do it ourselves.
But,
I can be a high price consultant.
or do we want to wait and talk to the board at the dinner
Pro bono.
or make a decision to schedule a meeting?
I'd say we talked to the board first.
I think the tricky part from what I'm hearing is figuring out what is the best use there, because everybody's gonna have, and it used to be a mountain biking trail, now it's social trails, but the dogs are back there, and how to accommodate everybody.
I personally think that if you do a survey without educating the people first, then you're gonna get crappy results. The first thing that has to happen is we got to somehow reach to the public, and whether somebody is literally standing at those trails handing out folks flyers saying, this is the trail, and this is, by the way, this is what's allowed, not allowed. We're just trying to inform you. We're not yelling at you. We're not giving you a ticket. We just want you to know. Even something simple as that, you educate all the folks there first. After they're educated, then you can have a survey, and the results are going to be more meaningful. Really, once people know what can or can't be done.
And actually, I remember when Boulder used to have the leash law, and they would stand at
Yeah.
every single trailhead, they would hand out leashes and hand out information and talk to people.
Well,
about
signs
it.
are great, and they're not that expensive. When I bike around where it says keep your dog, I don't have a dog off my leash, but keep your dog off leash, it's the Coyote area, back over here by Indiana, in those trails. I see that and I go, oh, okay. Are we talking about the area behind the pool where it's,
Mhm.
the other side? Okay. Where's their mountain biking trail? I see cement trails everywhere.
Out
You mean
here.
If you came off
It's-
road and went down,
yeah.
okay.
It's the area between the cement trails, but,
It's just kind of all this area in here.
so,
Yeah, I see the pool.
So it's
Yeah.
all this dirt.
so the cement trail is this, and it goes up here and comes around,
Right.
around here. So we're talking about that whole open space area between the two neighborhoods, between the cement trail. The actual town trail that is there is supposed to be a mountain bike trail. But instead, it's just a deteriorated trail that now has a million spiderweb social trails that go in and out of it, and there's almost no difference between what the actual trail was, what the social trails were. And yes, you do see mountain bikers on it, but you by far see more dog walkers on it,
The
or
interesting
just
thing is,
walkers or runners on it than you actually see mountain bikers.
so I moved here in 2012, and I rode that trail right away. The first thing I saw, 'cause there's no signs, was I saw several park benches in different areas on Coyote Ridge, and I was like, oh, maybe this isn't a mountain. I can't ride my bike in it, because it looked like you're not going to put a park bench in a mountain bike trail. Who's going to, it's usually you put those things on walking trails or hiking trails for folks who, to rest. So it immediately made me think that maybe I shouldn't bike there. So I didn't know until you even brought it up.
Yeah.
I can't remember if the recommendation came through this group kind of towards the end of last year, but I think it may have even been a Chili Fest recommendation, or it was sent via email, is using the disc. We've had groups that have wanted to develop this into a mountain bike area and not continue on with Coyote Ridge due just to some of the terrain and slopes and erosion. So I think you guys are right with some of the public engagement and that education piece is probably pretty critical.
Yeah. So I think we do the education piece first, and that will allow us to then, like Corbett said, do a better formed, whether it's a survey or just asking for feedback, but a better informed input from the public once they kind of know the background of the area.
Do we need to make a decision on that
No,
tonight?
we don't
or
need to
what's
make a
the-
decision on that tonight. So we'll discuss it with the board as one of our, I guess let's just jump ahead right now to the dinner report. I see the three primary things we need to discuss are Coyote Ridge, the trail expenditures for the year and how we wanna deal with public engagement, and then, Superior Town Center Civic Space.
Just one more before we get off of the trails, but do we have interconnectivity to the US 36 new trails? I know that that's been a big discussion with just in and out of those trails, and I know that, you know, our list was done a while back, and there was a lot of additional discussions and tie-ins, so I just didn't know how those tie onto our trails list, but that's something that we can talk about further, but I just wanna make sure that we have, you know, interconnectivity, because I think that's a key thing that a lot of people brought up within the last year. At various activities.
So the things that are I believe missing from the 5-year trails plan, like you brought up, Corey, was we had kind of reprioritized the Davidson Mesa connection, but also anything really dealing with trails in and out of town center is not on the 5-year trails plan. A lot of that is just gonna be covered by the development, but the question is, do we, you know, like the Coal Creek Crossing Trail was part of that development, it was never on the 5-year trails plan. All these years, it was part of an FDP, it was not in the 5-year trails plan. So, so we know that that was an oversight, it should have been on the 5-year trails plan so everyone was aware of it. So do we wanna formalize any trail connections with town center and get them on the 5-year trails plan?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what they are and how the interconnectivity of the town center is, but I know that, you know, there was discussion about not only the connection to Davidson Mesa, but the other connection was down on the, toward the mall, and the connection through by the bike, through the disc golf.
We
And
talked
you know,
about
it was hard trail versus soft trail,
Yeah.
all those things, but you know, it is a trail, and let's let it sit for a while, but those are the type of things that I think should be put on there for discussion, whether they're high on the list or low on the list, at least they're there, to make sure we have that additional trail connectivity for the town and for the users.
And we've batted this around a little bit, and maybe this group, you know, we can all collectively come up with a good way to address it. But those trails aren't even conceptually there yet. So, you know, maybe this group could be part of that review process when those FDPs come forward. Or maybe we could somehow try to get ahead of the game and based off of what's been approved, maybe looking at some trails. But from staff's perspective, what we've struggled with is those submittals change so quickly that, you know, maybe we could start to wrap our heads around a good process to bring those trails into play. Because you're right. I mean, we'll get trails.
It's just even in the 250 buffer zone, there's a trail line stated, but there's no trail shown.
Right.
Interconnectivity of where's it connect on the east or west or north south. You know, those type of things are all outstanding issues that I think I would like to, you know, propose to the board that we'd like to have input on those.
I agree.
For overall tie to the trail system that we're looking at.
I agree. Yeah, and that's a perfect example because the trail that's shown in the buffer in the
It
FDP.
doesn't connect it.
Well, in this FDP that's likely to come forward, it's probably coming out. So,
And then you have a rift between the two.
right. So, but I think you're right. I
You
think
have a good buffer, but no.
I think the
So say that again, Patrick, you're saying that the trail that's always been in the buffer zone is now coming out, there's gonna be no trail in the buffer zone?
that's potentially what could be submitted on the FDP, correct? Or the trail could move further to the bottom of the buffer, more. And again, so you could start to see the complexities of trying to put trails that are in the development stages on a on a planning document is really tough because they come and go so quickly.
Yeah,
But maybe there is a way that we can,
But from a master planning and trail interconnectivity, if you don't have a connection, now you're segregating the communities. And that's the
Right.
whole point of the trails, is that I can walk from the upper area there down to town center and not
Mhm.
have, oh, I have to go down McCaslin, and that's my only alternate.
yeah, agreed.
And I mean,
Well,
trying to tie Old Town, to
Yeah.
town center to whole,
well, like I said, one of the three things I think we need to talk with the board at the dinner is about trails, public engagement for trails. We can certainly tack this on,
I just-
of the general, the bikeway and town center connections.
Right.
How do we wanna get that on the radar so that it's a little bit more thought out than going piecemeal, FDP by FDP? Have a little bit more of a master plan for these trails that are going in and out of town center, particularly when they're connecting to the neighborhoods too. Anything connecting to Ridgetown, connecting to Rock Creek.
And
It's a little bit more thought out than going piece by piece by piece.
then I think the important thing there also is to be able to be proactive at understanding how, okay, not only that, what this whole trail system is gonna look like, but do we wanna add, potentially add any additional trail to tie into the other areas? Be proactive to say, if this happens this way, we think we could have this trail that would make something make it all tie in nicely instead of after the fact.
well, and it's the same as we're talking about with,
Yeah.
Calmonte, down there,
Mhm.
that they're putting in a piece, and now we need to tie in the other piece to connect back to the trail. Otherwise, you have a little short segment that
Yep.
isn't going anywhere. But they have it in their plan. So it's that
Totally.
making sure we understand. And I think our trail plans talk a lot about interconnectivity along the chasm,
Mhm.
so.
Okay.
Anyway, sorry. Continuing on about other
Well,
issues.
yeah, so I think we're wrapped up on Coyote Ridge, and just to wrap up the board dinner thing, the third piece, so we have Coyote Ridge, we have trails. The third piece would be the Superior Town Center, the 40,000 up to 40,000 square feet of civic space. The board's really, in the last couple board retreats, has really kind of progressed on this, and they're starting they're gonna have, the consultant, remind me the name again.
Barker, Reeker, CCAT,
Yeah.
yeah, BRS.
They're gonna, be involved with putting together some, examples of what that space could look like. Right now, it seems to be, the board seems to be gearing this more towards library community space without much a recreation component to it. But, do we wanna ask the board to have PROSTAC formally involved in some of this process? Cause right
Can
now,
I say yes?
we haven't been tasked with that specifically. I mean, we're kind of on the we've been on the
Well-
outside of it, but do we wanna get a specific assignment from the board
Yes.
regarding this
Why wouldn't we?
civic space?
Yes. And last year, we looked at their plans,
Well,
and
and-
they had about 40,000 square feet for a $10 million rec center.
Mhm. So last year, we did, per the board's request, do the space planning for 40,000 square feet when we were doing the impact sports study or proposal. Again, kind of remembering back, there was some question as to if it's library space, should it be a separate library work group? Should it be a PROSTAC item? Should it be a board item? Because it starts to kind of veer out into another subject matter that's not. But again, if you're talking civics space or community gathering space with a library component, maybe it makes sense. But there has that question has been raised, is what do you do with library space, and who is the best group to kind of help advise on that?
So I think as part of the board dinner, we need to ask the board to make a decision whether that PROSTAC should be brought into this, in this early phase of it, rather than, just staff works with BRS to come up with these plans, and then PROSTAC is brought in after the fact to comment on them. I think it's probably in everyone's best interest to get us involved in the planning phase and not just the review phase. So third item I think we should ask the board at the dinner to discuss. All right, so that would bring us to the number 6, I guess, is gonna be our final item, the programming of the Kuffner T-ball field at Founders Park. You know, we addressed this last year. The board had approved some limited use for programming it for T-ball games. What was it, like 6 hours a week or something like that?
This committee voted 5-3 in favor of recommending the board allow up to 6 hours of programmable time on Kuffner Field for the months of April through June 2015, with the review period this year.
So, I mean, they ended up not using it a whole lot because of the weather.
The weather, correct.
So we don't really have, you know, they didn't have a full schedule to really know what the feedback from the residents were.
What was it was too wet?
It was too wet, that infield, that skinned infield, yep.
But, I mean, that's the question, do we want to recommend to the board that they continue with the, you know, basically continue our recommendation from last year? Do we, you know, do we want to do a little bit more outreach to the community before we make that recommendation?
Have they approached us yet?
What's that?
Has Monarch approached us yet?
They haven't.
They have not.
The problem was that when we dealt with it last year, I mean, they were starting within weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
And we addressed it, so we put it here in January to kind of get ahead of it. We don't need to make any decision now because they don't start till the end of March, right?
Yep.
They are registering baseball
Yeah.
players right now.
Friday.
Yep.
And they're starting indoor practice.
You're saying that they haven't inquired about using it again for the same purpose?
Right, we normally don't start dealing with field schedules probably for another couple weeks, but they have not approached us yet.
This was a touchy thing, and I think I understand what Ron is going there. I think this group might want to make a decision on whether you would want to go for it again another year, and then reach out to them and say, hey, if this group says, yeah, we'd like to see this happen again, then be proactive and reach out to the organization and say, hey, is there any interest in doing this again? So that we're not doing this at the last minute again with this grant.
What kind of feedback did we get from the community? Any? Have we asked?
With staff did not receive feedback, one way or the other, positive or negative.
Sarah, what are your thoughts?
I'm opposed to it principally, but at the same time, because this park isn't supposed to be scheduled, but I think from what I heard from the president of Monarch Little League, it was really successful. The parents loved it. It was a nice little field for them because it was, for T-ball, it was very contained.
And to me, it utilizes the field that's there, and the money was spent on the backstop and everything, and allows other programming on the other fields, just
Yeah.
knowing how all the field programming is always tight.
So I would imagine that, you know, that the field of depth, that it worked really well, the field is
It was
provided
nice
that
light.
purpose. But what about the residents, the traffic, the parking? Was there any of those, because that was what the concern was, in that.
Patrick said that there weren't any.
Well,
But
and
did you see
staff-
it in the community?
Yeah, just that we just didn't receive anything.
Nobody from over there, I mean, I just know in general, everybody in the area is tired of all of the traffic. But we can't say that it's the baseball traffic versus people going to Target versus the construction traffic. There's really no separating any of that out. And so I don't know that it's baseball, which is, you know, a great sport for a lot of little kids to say the traffic is a problem, because I don't think it's what.
Well, and staff worked with the league, right, to encourage parking in the Target parking lot rather than
Yeah, I
parking
don't-
on the street.
I don't
You got
know
Main
that,
Street for cutouts, for parking. That's what it was designed for, Coal Creek. Am I wrong or am I right?
well,
We had the bump outs for parking,
But that
correct,
wasn't
for the
due
park?
last year.
one of the board's requests
For this
one,
year.
one of the board's conditions, if I'm remembering, I can go back and watch, is that we ask Monarch Little League to park in the shopping center, and I think that was a request from the board. But I'd have to really go back, but I'm almost certain that's what that
I think the
was.
concern was when you had back-to-back
Correct,
practices.
yeah.
So you'd have a group practicing using all those spots, and then make sure that they were using target not.
Is 6 hours even long enough for little kids to play? It seems kinda long, it might seem kinda short. Maybe we should ask them if they need more
It was
time.
based on their game time, that each
Yeah.
game would take an hour, and they had 5 or 6 games a week, and that's what the constraint was based on, is how many games could fit in, and it was kinda, okay.
And this was programmed hours. I mean, they could still drop in on like an evening on a weeknight.
Wednesday or something like
Yeah.
that.
And
Right.
do practice.
And have
They
practice
just
for like
couldn't
45 minutes.
Yep.
schedule they couldn't reserve the field for
It was
anything
reserved
more
for
than the
games
6
for that
hours.
6 hours.
And their intention seemed to be that was mostly gonna be on Saturdays for games.
I think we should offer them more hours during the week, because say, for a prime example, each one of us has a team that we coach, and it's hard to get on that field. You have 45 minutes, you have 45 minutes, you have 45 minutes, there goes 6 hours in a hurry, regardless what you have on Saturday. So I think we need to give them more time. That's designed for T-ball, let's give it to them.
And is it,
My argument's gonna be, this was not supposed to be a programmed park. We are now programming this. If we're gonna program that, then I want the green space that's on the other side programmable for soccer, for ultimate frisbee, and for any other sport that wants to come in and play.
Yeah, my daughter
I mean,
can't-
I'm gonna be a real stick in the
My
mud.
daughter,
on
we
this.
can't get a field anywhere for soccer, so I think it'd be appropriate to get soccer on the field and.
I see
No,
kids
it's
playing
not-
soccer up there all the time.
It's
So
Denver's
how hard
boss.
is
It's
this to
not
get
programmed.
away?
It's a dangerous
not
precedent.
programmed.
I'm
It's the
gonna
drop-in.
oppose it.
It's a
It
drop-in,
hasn't-
so
Because I don't believe we
That's
should.
first come, first serve on the drop-in field.
Sandy, are you saying at El Dorado Cave that should be a scheduled field then?
That's not a scheduled field either.
Should it be?
That's what I'm saying, I mean,
Should it be?
is that what you're arguing, that we should?
Is Superior,
Yeah,
Superior
I mean,
Elementary a program field?
I have a problem
I can
with
guarantee
us
I
saying this was an
schedule
unprogrammed
practices on
park,
that
Yeah.
field.
and now we are changing the rules. And if we
But
are
that would
changing
be
the rules for this,
That would
Can
be-
we,
then we
we
need
have
to change it for the grass.
conversations. I wanna hear what Sandy's saying, and then if we could, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm
Yeah,
having a
no,
hard time.
I mean,
Yeah,
my concept is, when we approved this park, it was to be an unprogrammed park. We first took the slippery slope and we programmed the shelter.
Right.
Then we took this new part thing and we're now programming for baseball. Well, that's because some people, maybe in original town, I don't know, like baseball. But why are we saying yes to baseball, but we're not saying yes to soccer or to rugby or anybody else who wants to use that green space? I didn't use my favorite sport specifically, but, I mean, this is a problem for me. Why are we allowing this for Little League, but we're not allowing the other grass? If we're gonna do this, then, yeah, I'm gonna say, why are we not programming that park up there?
Well, and-
Okay, that's what I.
And you're,
But my point
You're-
right now is we made a decision, this was an unprogrammed park, and now all of a sudden, we're granting exceptions because we have some people who love baseball.
but one could argue.
Who's your people that loves baseball? Are you pointing me out? Sandy,
No,
who
I'm
are you
not
pointing
pointing
out? Who are you
anybody
pointing
out at all.
Who are you pointing out? In original town likes baseball. My point is this, they're little kids. They don't weigh 120 pounds, they're 65 pounds and less. They're not tearing up that baseball field versus ultimate frisbee on top, like a bunch of guys do from CU, tearing the grass up.
But one could argue
If we're gonna
that-
program it, let's program it all.
Right.
Even everything, even El Dorado, let's program it all.
Well, but let's go to the root of
Let's
this.
charge deposits, let's make some money
One
on
could
this.
argue that the board never should have verbalized that the park wasn't gonna be programmed. Because that was unprecedented for the town. I mean, no, there's never been any other promise that another park, no one's promising.
It's actually in the, comprehensive plan though, that
That's
neighborhood
the
parks
only-
are unprogrammed parks, and that was a neighborhood park.
So we're gonna turn Monarch
So
baseball
it
away?
wasn't the board.
Wow, okay.
So,
That's
But,
what we're.
but I would almost argue that this is not a neighborhood park, it's actually a community park. But,
Closest neighborhood to Sagamore.
but, I mean, the same could be said for El Dorado, the El Dorado park that's going in. It's size is greater than that of what's defines a neighborhood park. I mean, Founders is right on the cusp of whether it's, the acreage is a neighborhood or a community park. So, the fact of what you're saying with the El Dorado Park is, I mean, no one's really talking about right now whether or not that Great Lawn could be programmed, but no one's really saying it can't be programmed at some future date. And that's the problem with Founders right now is it was basically said that this park would not be programmed, and we've since the board has allowed certain elements of it to be programmed.
Just want to make a quick comment. So, in my personal opinion, there's a difference between a open field and a area set designed specifically for baseball. Now, back when I was growing up, we would be able to grab some neighborhood kids and get a pickup baseball game and maybe even a pickup football game. I have yet to see any of my kids' friends or anybody in any area doing any kind of pickup baseball game anymore. A baseball diamond is really designed for playing baseball or maybe even kickball, but even very rarely, I don't even see any kind of pickup kickball games. It's largely, if you're not doing that, it's not really being used. For an open field, you have kids just running around, flipping, doing whatever. It's just an open field. It's not really specifically designed to do anything. It accommodates more kids just to go in there and play in this field. So in my personal opinion, having a baseball area that could be reserved at certain times doesn't really take away, because a lot of people aren't just using that field, using that area, unless they're going to take a remote car or use the dirt for something else other than its intended purpose, which is totally different than an open field.
Don't you practice rugby on a baseball field? On the grass on the baseball field?
On the grass.
Okay.
On the
I
open
just wanna
grass.
make that point,
I'm just saying,
because we don't have programmed fields, and we don't have programmed grass anywhere, so Chris has to practice his rugby teams on a baseball field.
Well, again, you guys have probably heard me say this, and then I'll quickly get off my soapbox, but just because we do not program that field, do not be confused. Every other organization programs that field on their behalf for free. So, and staff,
There are a lot of people
and
that use
and
that.
staff has brought this up, is make sure you're careful about how you use programming. That's internally approved programming under the town, but we know of several groups that on their websites program that field for themselves. Yeah, so that's always something to keep in mind.
For those that don't know the history of Founders, that the boulders went in because Ultimate Frisbee was overrunning the use of that field. And soccer. And so they put the boulders in to dissuade those older age groups that were getting really aggressive towards each other about using the field and towards residents to break that up. That's why those boulders went in this program.
Well, I think we should start with finding out what they want, before we even discuss this.
And
They might not even want it.
again, just one little bit of clarification is it's not specific to Monarch Little League. The decision is that it will be programmed, and we let all groups, it became a first come, first served to submit their paperwork at that time. But the YMCA also submitted a request to use those fields. It just happened to come in after Monarch Little League. We also have a new baseball organization that'll be in BVI who has requested to use that field. So the approval wasn't specific to Monarch Little League because the town, I don't believe, is ever going to get in the business of trying.
Specific to T-ball, though.
It was very specific to T-ball, but
That wasn't specific to them?
no,
No, just the T-ball.
it was just to the activity of T-ball.
Yeah, we left it open because we didn't want to
Okay.
favor
Yeah,
a single organization. We wanted it to be fair.
So if another T-ball organization came today or tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
they would get it, and Monarch Little League.
Correct. Now, what we did last year is in one blanket email, I let the interested parties know, this is the recommendation, here's the parameters. You can use the field.
You know, we can do what Ron said, wait and see what staff hears in the next few weeks, and then we can make a recommendation next month if it looks demand for more than the 6 hours, we can revisit whether or not we, you know, like George is proposing that we recommend that it be used for more than 6 hours, or we can stand behind our previous recommendations of the board.
Is there any rent, I mean, is it worth it to like rent the thing, like to turn it into some revenue?
We have a group right now that's gonna be based out of the new Boulder Valley Ice who
I mean, I don't wanna stick it to the kids or something, but if.
Who is asked to
Boulder
use
Valley-
it.
I mean, if they
Let's
wanna
make some
pay,
money on it.
if they wanna pay a few $100, maybe that would help cover some maintenance and.
Absolutely. Cover maintenance, crusher fines on the field,
Something
some
to
mud
go
puddles or something up, you know?
grade it now and then.
Absolutely.
I mean, and
But
the
then you
same
go
thing
back to
could
the
be
cities.
used with the green space, if we actually controlled it and said, you know, if you're on there with an organized activity, now I'm not talking about the kids who show up from the neighborhood and come and play, but if Patrick knows of people who are promoting it on their website, my attitude says, we need to write it and say, if you're gonna use it, you gotta pay for it. If you're gonna schedule it, you know, that to me is just wrong.
I
You know,
agree-
we're
I
not
agree
making
with you,
any
Susan.
money
If-
off that
if
at
you're gonna
all,
make some money on our
and they're
fields.
coming and wearing out our fields. I mean, I hope that at least the organizations that are using it are from within Superior. I hope it's Superior Rugby, I hope it's Superior kids who play soccer or something, but I have no way of knowing, but we're allowing them to come in and put an organized activity on our field, and we're not getting any compensation
But if
for
you
it.
charge them, if you say, if you're gonna come here and use it whenever you want, you gotta pay us something. Then they get on that field, and somebody else wants to come out and use it, then we're back in the same boat that we were when Ultimate was there. You're basically, that's still the same as programming. And I think that we can't go down that road. We have this discussion every year now. I think that we've really stepped over our boundary letting T-ball do it, and I think it was great. I thought it was good that the kids can use it. But if now we're starting to expand that conversation and say, well, let's start making money on the fields and let's start doing this, and I think that's the wrong thing to do. If anything, then we go back and say, we're not programming at all. T-ball, you're out of luck. Shelter, you're out of luck.
But they could use it on a first come, first
That's
served
right.
Mhm.
basis.
That's right, yeah.
So if somebody first comes, first served basis, and say Monarch Little League says we're second or third in line, we need a place to play T-ball, like, our organization needs a field, where are we gonna put them? Where are we gonna, it's not our business, I mean, we have 2 baseball fields, like, can we move them up there to community park?
Where do we put any of the other amateur, you know, youth sports programs we have? We don't have anywhere to put them, and so we're building space, but we're not using it. We're not allowing our resident teams and sports to use it, and so.
Well, or we're ignoring like Eldorado K-8 actually putting a field on there.
Yeah, and I agree with that,
Opportunity to
because
do
that's
that,
what
and
we
that
all
was
wanted in
shut
the first
down.
place.
Exactly.
But it got squished because the residents up there didn't want a field, they didn't want parking lots, but yet the folks down in Original Town in Sagamore, they have to deal with it. It's one of the few green spaces that people can.
And the
play
reason
ball.
that we want it to be green is because we have been completely impacted by surrounding development,
Yeah.
including the marketplace, which is huge. And we continue to be.
Yeah.
Well, and it's on our priority list. I mean, Community Park has a green space, but it's not a field. And the fields at the Founders Park are better than the ones that are actually programmed at Community Park.
You're talking about the West Field.
The West Field.
Yeah. Isn't that on
But
the
that's
list
like
of things
heavily
too?
used, heavily used.
Absolutely.
That field is pretty nice boundaries.
Yeah, I mean, so comparison, we're programming space that's not even proper field, but not programming something that's actually
We're not
proper for.
managing, you know, I guess
Yeah.
that's the piece for me, is we're not managing this piece down here. And we could be managing it and using it to, provide value to Superior Rugby and other, I mean, maybe we say, you know what? This field is strictly gonna be for youth sports, just like our baseball field can really only be for kids. It's not designed to be
No, it's not designed
adult.
for a bunch of 6th graders. and
You
7th
know,
graders.
we're
It's
talking
designed
about
for
kids,
itty bitty
and so
kids.
we can do the same thing with that green space and put some limitations on who can use it.
Well, then I'd say
And that
let's
would
go
keep
back
out
to
the
Eldorado.
Absolutely,
Up to
absolutely.
the impacts
I mean,
from,
I really do.
Well, and that's,
University of
from the
Colorado.
University of Colorado Ultimate.
The only thing is that then you're gonna get back into the same conversation that we had with the Rock Creek Flyers, where the Rock Creek Flyers are using the North Pole and taken away from the residents' ability to the North Pole, and we were having discussions on that recently, and so now you're gonna go back into that conversation saying, okay, well, now we have all our fields, booked out, and residents can't use them, and now, what do? So you
But we're making money.
Well, you're making money, but you go from one conversation to another conversation, right?
Well, I think you come up with a balance. We didn't allow that baseball field to be programmed 24/7. And if we want to continue to maintain it so the residents can use it, we do the exact same thing with the fields.
We're experiencing symptoms of the disease is the fact that we do not have enough fields for our community. And we're trying to make it work. We need to find somewhere to put like legitimate fields.
Well, and, we have to keep in mind that town center will have a multi-purpose field in it. I mean, that's on parcel 2.
At one. It'll be.
That's not a formal field
It
on
will-
one.
Because we talked about possibly having a baseball field there.
It's a dotted line of this is what could fit here, but it's not gonna be.
There's one field down there.
It's not gonna be an
There's
actual
one field.
field. It's just gonna be, this is what the grass area could accommodate.
Yeah, but is
That-
it gonna be flat, a big flat area?
It'll be flat, but it's not gonna have, it's not gonna have a dirt infield, it's not gonna have backstop, it's just gonna be grass.
But we've talked about possibly doing U10 soccer on parcel 1 or U12 soccer, right, Patrick, or no?
Yeah, I think we were showing all those uses, and at one point we were asked to take them out, but yeah, I think all of it's on the table.
Parcel 2, but it was meant to be open to be used for younger ages.
Yeah.
It was, but it's much the same, parcel 1 is gonna be much the same as Founders, and much the same as El Dorado of, this could fit here, but it wasn't an actual formalized field. So the idea, I believe, is that, yes, you could probably put a youth soccer team there, but it's not necessarily maintained or gonna be striped or anything, or reserved for that use. The multi-purpose field in parcel 2, obviously, will be.
We had received direction to no longer show parcel 1 as a programmable space, to show it more as an open green space. But I don't think that dialogue's been fully vetted out. That was more of.
It's just a matter of time before parcel 1 is programmed.
Right, that was more of just a design change in that maybe that area stay a little more open.
But my point was, I mean, we do kind of have to look at the horizon in a little bit, because that is on the horizon, the multi-purpose field in parcel 2. So, when you're talking about soccer, or you're talking about ultimate or something, those things will actually have an additional space. Baseball will not. Baseball will not have a formalized field in town center, whereas the other sports that can go on a multi-purpose field will.
Yes.
So. All right, well, like we said, we'll wait and see if staff gets some feedback on what the demand for the baseball field is, and we can resume this discussion.
So just
next.
point of clarification, I think you asked that did you say you asked would staff be proactive and ask if people are to be interested, instead of waiting for them to come and ask staff?
I was suggesting primarily that this group decide amongst yourselves whether you want to do this again on a trial basis for another year with Monarch, Little League, or somebody else. And that way, if staff does have the opportunity to reach out to Monarch and say, are you interested in this again, you really don't have to revisit it later. To me, it's a pretty simple decision.
I think we should open it up for one more year to continue the periodic Saturday time window to be able to program it. And whether or not that's works or it causes hassle, at least we find out a little bit more input. Because for last year, I don't think there was any pros or cons. It wasn't an impact, from what I hear.
Well, then, do we have a motion to continue the recommendation from last year to program Kuffner Field for T-ball use up to 6 hours per week?
I
don't see any reason.
I would motion that we, yes, what you said.
So
That
do
we've
we-
So you
continued
second
for-
that.
continue-
So do we have a
continue the
second?
Motion from last
So
year.
I'll make that motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Discussion?
I don't think we need
we should give them the option of a couple more hours.
So, I like the idea of.
Rescheduling games, make up games. Have that deal.
I like the idea of kind of a continuing resolution, if you will, for the field, because one of the things it does is provides you information for a stepping stone if you want to make other areas programmable. This will, especially specifically in that area, will kind of give you some data points is, okay, we didn't really learn a lot last year because of construction, because of what's already going on in that area, but maybe we might learn a little bit more this year. If we really notice it becomes a problem, then it may be an easy discussion to say, no, we're not going to program any field, but it could be a stepping stone to allowing some of the other fields to potentially be programmed if that's what folks wish. It just gives you more data, and it was a low impact way, that small field to provide you some data for the future.
And had designated hours, so it's not like it's
Yes.
overrunning all day. That was one of the key things we talked about with programming.
And that's what I see, if we continue the recommendation, like Corbett said, we didn't really learn a lot last year. If we were to increase the hours now, we're increasing the hours based on no real new information. So we're potentially gonna shoot ourselves in the foot of, we increase the hours and cause a problem. We never really learned whether or not the 6 hours a week was a problem because they never had a full season.
I think we
I
also.
think we're
wait
best
for-
continuing rather than increasing at this juncture.
And if we continue this proposal and others are interested and they actually come with, 6 hours is 1 hour too short, at least then we have an understanding of, what kind of time frame are they looking at, what's working for them as well from their, organization and their structure of games and utilization.
The other thing is that if they come back, so if we vote on we vote on this and we're in all agreement, they come back and say, hey, great, we wanted 2 hours, we can re-vote on adding an extra couple of hours, right? I mean, that's not like saying right now, it's forever gonna be 6. We could re-vote to adjust the amount of hours for this season as well if we get a lot of pushback, potentially.
I think, I'm not anti-baseball in any way. I do not think we should do this. It is a Band-Aid on a much bigger problem that we're not helping, and on principle of, we need to really address this issue. I also just don't think programming is a good idea. I think it opens us up to have to program to other groups, other sports, and other places. I think there's a lot of pressure on that park already, so I'm definitely not, I'm not going to vote in favor of it personally.
And I will vote no, in the same principle I did last year, which was if we're gonna program that, we said we weren't gonna program that park, so if we're not gonna program for that, then let's just go ahead and program the park.
And I'll just say my one reason that I think we should program it is that putting in a backstop and a baseball facility is an expensive venture. And to have that facility there and not be able to program it, I think is a loss for the town. That I think, we should really utilize that space and why we actually built it.
Well, that is the good question. Why did that board agree to build something
I'm just
and
saying.
agree to not program the field? So, yeah, it is interesting. And I have a kid that is heavily involved in baseball, but I cannot vote to program that field. And if as Sandy said, if we're gonna do that, then we have to open up to everything. And then once again, we have that park being the primary park. And it is already crazy with traffic around here. And I just can't imagine adding more things going down that street. It's a constant battle. It's a constant battle. And, I'm afraid that once I'm gone off of this board, which happens this summer, that we're gonna have people just say, well, it's been programmed and there's nobody gonna be holding the candle of, this park was never meant to be programmed, ever. And even the board steps in and they're happy with the baseball. It's maddening.
Did you have last year's, Patrick?
The motion?
Wasn't it 3 hours on Saturday and then 1 hour each 3 nights or something like that?
I believe that got changed to a flat 6 based upon the comments we received from the baseball group.
Okay.
But we
I
ended
thought
up,
We discussed having 2 games on Saturdays only, so
Correct.
not go past noon,
yep.
therefore keeping some kind of.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think it would,
it got changed.
At
too.
one,
Oh, yeah.
at one point, we had it, I think we were looking at saying you could use it on Tuesday, Thursday,
Right.
and the 6 hours was you'd have a Tuesday practice, a Thursday practice, and a Saturday game. And yeah, and then they came back and said, well, our real need is games, because we can kind of practice here unscheduled.
Because that was part of our
And then we-
discussion, was that
yeah.
going from 9 to 3 on a Saturday
Yeah.
was definitely.
Let me see if I
And there were a lot of other baseball, a lot of the AA and AAA practiced up there at
Mhm.
various times as well. Because the other fields were closed, I mean, just flat out closed, and so they were up there practicing.
We did, that's a good point, we did notice that. We
Yeah.
closed our fields and we shut them, lock them, is to not damage the infield, but this field is an open use field, so it did see a little bit of use during the rainy season up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, we have a motion on the
They
table,
were,
it's been
they were
seconded.
doing a lot of heavy hitting.
So, all,
The motion is
to continue last
that was
year's,
done last year on a
Correct.
trial basis for another year.
Which would be recommend the board allow up to 6 hours of programmable time on the Kuffner T-ball field for the months of April through June.
so, all in favor? Opposed?
You guys are consistent.
5-3.
We had the same discussion last year.
Change my opinion.
Okay, so update items, we basically covered the school parcel. Patrick, the other update items.
The board approved a contract to replace the grass, synthetic grass surface on Williams Field. That project will hopefully begin here shortly.
That's in that turf in my backyard?
You can have the.
You can have-
You don't want it, it's full of lead.
I'll get you the end zone.
Yeah, it's
bad.
not just lead, it's all kinds of
bad
other
stuff.
stuff.
Uh-oh.
You just don't want it.
It's been leaching into the groundwater in places where they couldn't.
I'll retract my request.
I was gonna give you the end zone, man. Come on.
Kill your dog.
I wanna do that.
The Monday night, staff's also bringing forward to the board a proposal to work with Matrix Design Group to bring forward an FDP for park parcels 1 and 2. This is a break from working with Design Concepts. We put this project, Design Concepts did a fantastic job getting us to concepts, but we put this out to bid, and Matrix Design Group submitted a fantastic bid. They also have the horsepower to deal with park development in floodplains, and had extensive examples and backgrounds dealing with pretty complex park structures within floodways and floodplains. So we're going to bring forward a contract to the board to work between now and the summer to have an FDP for parcels 1 and 2.
Patrick, have you seen any, has the direction changed at all on parcel 2, or is the plan still to have a full-size?
Yep.
Multi-purpose field?
Yeah, no, so what this will be is taking the design concepts, if you guys kind of remember where we left parcel 1 and 2, now it's just taking it to that next level of actual design, design documents, grading, retaining walls, bridge design. So taking what was kind of big picture and now getting it closer to a construction document. And we felt that Matrix was the group to do that.
Are they local?
Matrix is local.
So
Yep.
funny, that was the question I was gonna ask, cause I hadn't heard of them.
Yeah, Matrix Design is a big group, a lot of work with, down along the Platte River, currently doing work, on big dry creek fields for the city of Westminster. They seem to have great background with, just parks and in floodways and along creekways. And a big firm, so they have the horsepower to get us through this process, which is fairly technical, just dealing with, FEMA and some of those issues you have to deal with in a waterway.
What's the timeframe if they're approved then? Like 2 years still, 2 years out or so?
Yeah, so we'll have them, I've been given direction to bring forward to the board an FDP by this summer, and then those FDPs are good for, I believe, 2 if not 3 years for construction. There are some, with the Clomar and some of the permitting process, it shrinks that window a little bit. You'd have to reapply for some permits if we stretch this out too long. So I think it's kind of a 2-year window. But really exciting. So this group will be able to see FDP documents here within the next couple months, actually laying out what is physically can and can't happen on parcel 1 and 2. So pretty exciting. As I mentioned, the board's going to review a contract. Staff's recommending we work with a group called ECI to build the El Dorado Park site. They were low bid and had fantastic references, several large park projects. They kind of dwarf our 12 acres. We tend to think that's a pretty big spot, and then these guys come forward with like 64-acre park plans. So we'll be recommending that to the board. And then just wanted to quickly update the group that due to the construction on US 36, specifically in the area of Coal Creek the Coal Creek underpass, any plant material that CDOT disturbed during that process is legally owed back to the town at CDOT's expense. So they owe us 56 trees and 4,000 square feet of shrubs of riparian type material, unirrigated. Has to remain within 75 feet of that corridor. So immediately east of McCaslin, we had the really significant flood damage, and there's a huge washout area. For those of you that use it, that's where the manhole kind of pops up. That area, as part of parcel 1 development, would need planting in that area anyway for water quality. So this is a good way for the town to get that plant material put in at CDOT's expense ahead of the project. We would have to add that plant material as a buffer between the uses on Park 1 and the creek anyway. So in those really...
Does it need to be replaced what was damaged? I mean, is that not, or is that just because of where the trail is now? It's not appropriate to still have it a wooded...
So say that again. I want to make sure I'm understanding.
So they destroyed greenery.
Right.
Therefore they owe it back. But don't we need to restore that greenery?
The space where that greenery is now a giant box culvert.
Okay, the one that...
It's physically, it was part of the expansion.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So...
Can we wait to put the shrubbery in until the park is developed so that it doesn't just get destroyed all over again? I mean...
Or they're designing
Or how
around
do you
it.
put in 56 trees without watering?
These would be just the riparian trees that are naturally in that creek corridor.
Okay.
So right when you cross under,
Yeah.
actually, bear with me.
It's all right. It just seems like, why not wait until...
They have we'd miss,
Then you just wouldn't get it.
that we would just,
You have to have them.
we have to have
installed in a
them,
certain time frame.
yeah. So give me, I've got it, I promise you, I won't make this go any longer than it needs to.
Just make some more shrubbery trees.
It's okay. I just you answered the question.
My recollection is that they were ancient trees and they were super expensive.
Yeah,
They're really tall. You have to have like
Big.
100 foot.
Well, they were big, they were really big.
okay, maybe I will make this longer than it was supposed to. That's awesome.
Wow.
Do you have an update on the...
We visited ICE last week.
We're supposed to start practicing there next week, that's why.
It's not gonna happen.
Not gonna happen.
Maybe Thursday if you're this. They got the turf down.
Yeah,
The
good.
turf is down. I went there this morning.
Is there a road to get there? I mean...
It's money.
That'll be one of the.
You're gonna have to be buying full.
I have been a part of some conversations where they'll work on
It's not a problem.
We-
$500 a construction road.
those guys.
It goes right along the river,
Right.
That's
Yeah.
a construction road, that's not a real road.
It'll be a temporary access road to that facility.
We live in Colorado. Wait for people turning in and out of there.
Well, the bigger question is you need to find a place for all the construction workers to park to continue working on it while having it open to the public. Wow.
And places for people to park.
Can you pan just a little bit to the left?
And the sad thing is, this is a PDF.
You need a refresh.
Is that commercial? Not going anywhere?
Yeah.
Wow.
Man.
How big is this
That like
file?
is like
It's a
100 baud modem.
it's a pretty huge file.
Can you hear the dial-up?
I use one as a paperweight.
All right, so all this was wiped out during the flood. All this plant material for the most part stays. This is parcel 1. This is the existing trail. So what they would be doing is bringing back in low-level shrubs, very similar to the plant material that'll go in at 2nd Avenue Bridge, unirrigated. But it allows us, this would have had to have been filled in anyway at some point when we developed parcel 1 to make sure that we have proper water quality controls between the uses here and here. So it's a way for us to get ahead of the game and kind of fix that big open scar that was left exposed due to the flood.
56 trees.
Very specific, very, very specific.
30 cottonwoods, 15 peach leaf willows.
So is that all the trees are right there, or all the shrubs and trees? So
All of the above.
Trees with the shrubs below?
Mm-hmm. It's a really wide space. It's a lot wider.
I wanted to count all those little green dots.
Yeah, somebody had to
56 of
count on the trees.
Control V, Control V.
All right, so last item, that was all the updates, right?
That's it.
Okay. We'll have the leadership election next month. I know that Sandy and I wish to continue, but if anyone else is interested in putting themselves forward as chair or vice chair, then it would probably be helpful if you state your interest before the next meeting, so we know going in, but we'll have the election next meeting, so. That's it. Meeting adjourned.
When is the dinner?
22nd of February.
Is it here?
It is here.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, that's I think it's the Monday after our February.
I believe
second.
it'll take the place of that second work session in February.
You said February 22nd?
What's that, Chris?
February 22nd?
I believe so. Yep.
I will be for dinner. I will be hiking around the Grand Canyon for 8 days.
Are you doing
I know.
Are you doing the rim to rim?
Rim to rim to rim. Yeah, so
How's that impact sports?
I wanna do-
Yeah.
8 days, just,
There's a huge sign.
my buddy has done it every year for like 36 years, so.
Are you hiking it or doing the run?
No, there's just hiking.
Yeah, there's still.
In February?
Got that? You got it?
It's cold, right?
It's cold, and last year during this time, they actually
February
had a
26th, yeah, I can
snow
tell you.
there inside the canyon. It
Yeah.
really rare.
We went on the Bryce Canyon side.
That's just all right.
This is
Oh, my goodness.
Angel Wood or Angel something trails. Yep. So we basically start off with the south rim, you hike in, spend a day, hike another day, go up to the north rim, camp out in a yurt that they have up there now.
Nice.
Yeah, and then do the whole process in reverse.
That's so loud.
I couldn't figure out how to turn this thing off.
Yeah,
Really
just
awesome.
impact sports.
So they have a yurt there, the north rim, and it's $25 for the yurt. So you spend 4 days getting to the yurt and you're hiking, and camping out there, and you're staying there all because I go over there.
No, I haven't been. Oh, you should check it out. Didn't know it was just open.
I didn't know what you did.
Join the hard hat?
Yeah, you're supposed to go, yeah.
I've heard about that.
Well, and you should, because I didn't see it. Yeah.
Okay. So I want to do that HUD system. You know, you just go. Yeah.
It's pretty.
That's what I want to do.
Man, and the opportunities are so endless.
Yeah.
What is your schedule tomorrow?
Meeting 9.
Yeah, I am.
See you guys.
No.
You know what, the only thing I do is
Oh, that's exciting. That's very exciting. I knew they were doing that. But they finally did.
They were still under.
Yeah, well, every time I go drive by, it has.
I put 'em up.
I just wanna see the numbers go because.
I put them up
what
on.
what ACC was.
ACC was 2.7 million.
Well, that's exciting.
I had it was a pretty tight clustering though, because everybody was.
There's probably was no room for error.
Well, and it made me. I felt a little bit better because when they're that tight, they were actually looking at what we were putting out there. They weren't guessing. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely, everything was pretty.
Because I was worried. I was worried we were going to be, because it was such a short bid time frame. I was like, dude, everybody's going to throw on like 15%, you know, because I didn't give them any time to bid it.
Absolutely.
But here,
Yeah, I mean, it's
I'll
constant
tell you what.
discussion.
right here, man, I'll show you.
Discussion is not-
Let's go.
So there's still a discussion on 40,000 square feet, are we gonna use that, are we gonna partial that? But, you know, with that survey, it's just, there's so much data, there's really too much data. And
Here we go. Fisher.
Fisher's doing work across the street, man. They're doing the aren't they doing the poem? The
Wait. We're going with ECI, right?
ECI, yeah. 2.3. Fisher was 2. They were a little
Fisher,
Fisher's doing work at Town Center right now. So they're out. I mean, they're a little high anyway.
of course, absolutely.
So it really would have been.
And
between-
Colorado Designscape was at 2.4.
It would have really been between
It would have been.
Christie and ECI.
Yeah.
And I'd never heard of Christie.
No, absolutely no.
They're
But
up in
Fisher's, we've been bumped ahead to it.
So,
Absolutely. Well, at least what I told you about.
oh, dude, you called it. You knew they'd be high.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you want to come, I've actually got the detailed numbers like. What
Just,
line items?
just print this out for me, Mom.
Yeah, dude.
Absolutely.
I gotta go. I'm gonna go actually. I'm gonna grab a little food on my way home. Try to do this tonight, man.
Cabin, we started cabin.
Ah.
We started cabin right now. And we're early. I'm trying to figure out my deadlines when my bulls are in pasture with my heifers. Because my timeline is not adding up to what things should be. Like, I shouldn't start cabin until March, until we started like
What?
And I'm like, what?
What causes that? Environmental? I mean, does temperature get them fucking going early or what? Huh?
See, like, I turned my bulls in like the 1st of June. They didn't until like July or August, and somehow the bull got to my heifers. I don't know whether it's like the neighbor's bull or if it's
Probably.
Probably. It's not.
Probably.
Figured it out a couple times. and honestly, like, and when I got vicious about that. I got ridiculous vicious. I ran them down on the road.
Who else has them up there? Bunch of people?
No, just relatives.
Hogan's or whatever?
Oh yeah. Well, not hungry.
Yeah. Those guys are family too? I didn't know that.
Clinkies are.
Cousins or what?
Yeah. First cousins.
You guys are right. You guys are related to everybody.
There was nothing to do in Superior back in the day except drinking. That's why we're related.
That's why that trail might move.
I know, but I'm like, are they gonna put that trail on top of that, right behind that, the gate? They're not gonna do it. They did away with that on the easement?
It'll probably move. I think they were all right with doing it on the easement, but it may make sense to move. Yeah, I think Franco might have been on board, but it might be better to move it down to the bottom of the hill.
Oh, you mean the way they did it now?
At the toe of that.
Don't give me stuff.
Yeah. I'm gonna come and get you at 3 o'clock in the morning,
Okay.
so you can ride around in the snow truck for 12 hours.
I do. I don't know what you do for 12 hours, but I'd love to ride around the truck.
So you
I
can
wanna drive it.
understand, so you can understand what I go through.
Oh, I always
Everybody
imagine
out there
it.
and their brother and their sister that thinks that blinking yellow and blue light is a target to be hit on. I swear to God.
Hey, they're trying to get as close as
possible. They're saying, I swear to God.
Little room for the plow. This is when there's a flood. This guy's the most fun to drive around with.
What are you talking about? I'm doing my job.
When we were up in
Heck,
the,
this part of town, I was doing my job.
remember when we rolled up to the top of the
Yeah,
hill?
absolutely. And you're like, we're gonna get stuck. I said, no, you're not. You got an operator who knows what the hell we're doing.
We had this. I don't even remember what
There's
we
a backhoe.
were
We're in a backhoe. We're in a backhoe. We're probably like at a 45 to 55 degree angle going up top of this hill. And the deal is when you're putting this trail here, they covered. And the deal is